Betting, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Bet with the Best podcast. Its mission is to explore better ways to bet on races, to seek out new, successful players, and to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. Welcome to the Bet with the Best podcast. We're focused all about betting on this show. We won't be giving out picks. We won't spend a lot of time talking about handicapping, but we will spend time focused on how to bet horse races. This is episode 6. We've had 5 great guests already, and we have another great guest this week. He's a professional horse player living in Florida, known for his numerous big pick 6 scores, and as the publisher of the Past the Wire weekly column. Please welcome Jonathan Stetton. Welcome, John. How's it going?
It's going well, Chris, and thank you so much for having me. And thank you for putting me on a show called The Bet with the Best. I appreciate that.
Well, you definitely have had success in the past, and what we want to do is sort of pick your brain for the listeners, find out, what's led to your success. And I usually like to start out with what I call the horse player origin story for each guest, how you got started in the game and how that evolved into where you are now as a professional horse player. So why don't you tell us your horse player origin story?
Well, I think I was probably as close to born into it as you can possibly be. My mom was at Belmont Park the day before I was born. And about a week later, she was at Belmont Park with me in a little stroller. So I grew up around the racetrack since I was a little kid. My dad was a mutual clerk. We weren't horse people per se on the backside at all. My dad was a mutual clerk, but I grew up in a family of gamblers. My mom bet the horses. My dad bet the horses. I had a lot of relatives that bet the horses. So, when I was a kid, we would spend every summer at Saratoga. We would go up there for August. It was a working vacation for my dad, and for us, it was like a vacation. So I was running around the racetrack at Saratoga when I was, but before I was even aware of what was going on. And by the time I was 5 or 6 or 7, I was already starting to become aware of horses and winning and betting and, what the game was all about. And I gravitated to it. I liked it. And ultimately, I, took a strange path of making a living at it for a long, long time. I will say my definition of a professional gambler or a professional horse player is someone who makes a living at it. I don't do that anymore. I still play. I'll still beat the game most years, but it's not how I make my living. And for 20-something years, it was. I go back now and look at my tax returns from, I would say the mid to late 80s to the early 2000s. And I had a hell of a run. I really did. I mean, I look at them and I came out ahead $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 consistently every year for a long time. It was always extremely tough. It took a tremendous amount of sacrifices, but I will be the first to say I think it's tougher today than it was when I was doing it. So, salute, hats off to anybody that's doing, that today, especially people doing it without rebates. When I was playing like that, there were no rebates. So, you were pretty much on your own.
So talk a little bit about when you actually started making a living playing the races and what that was like and what you had to do and sacrifice in order to be successful.
Well, so many people don't understand what's involved, but for many years, okay, I sacrificed any type of normal partnership relationship. Okay. It was very difficult for me. I mean, I had girlfriends, but it was very difficult for me to maintain relationships with girls because my income was derived from betting on the horses. I had no other source of income, and I certainly didn't come from money. So if I didn't win, I couldn't pay my bills per se. So the weekends were always very important to me. Friday, Saturday, even Sunday. I was going to the racetrack, so that meant Friday night I was studying. Saturday night I was studying. Sunday, I was at the races. Well, the dark day back then, they raced 6 days a week at NYRA, and primarily I was playing NYRA back then. I think Tuesday was the dark day. That was my only day off. And when you run like that constantly, Chris, when the day off comes, you're exhausted and you've got a million things to do, just normal life errands. So very, very difficult to maintain any type of a normal lifestyle. Try going in and buying a car, or getting a mortgage, or doing anything that requires any credit and putting down there that you're a professional gambler. I don't care what kind of money you put down. They'll laugh at you in a car dealership. So it took a lot of sacrifices, a lot of living and thinking outside the box, and just having a very non-conventional lifestyle and putting in a lot of work. It took back then a lot of work. There was a lot less computer information available, a lot less information available at your fingertips. You pretty much had the past performances, the magazines, ultimately Thorograph, but even replays were difficult to find back then. You would be at Belmont and have no idea what was happening at any other racetrack. There was no simulcasting. I mean, eventually there was, but it was just a completely different sport and completely different game. And it took literally a full-time job's amount of work, or the kind of work you'd put in if you owned a business. And it was a stigmatized way of life. Most people that are outside the game don't understand that. So you tell somebody, what do you do? I play horses. Well, that's for fun. What do you do for a living? No, that's what I do. And people just didn't grasp that, and most of them stigmatized it. So I loved it, and I'm not complaining about it, but it was a challenging way of life for many, many, many years. And we all know that in horse racing, you will go on some tough runs. And when my bankroll was tight and I went on a rough patch, I struggled. I fell behind and had to catch up on bills and payments, and ultimately got ahead and whatnot. But I learned early on in my career about discipline, about not chasing after lost money. Live to fight another day. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And I got very savvy with money management and how to bet and how to sustain myself. And ultimately, I learned what I believe is the secret to beating the game long term, even today. And that's I like to describe it as maybe cash less tickets, but win more money. When I believe that when you're right, you need to make it count, and you need to be not afraid to back your opinion and really go after something. And it goes against human nature. And I think that's one of the reasons why so few people are successful at the game. Our normal instinct and inclination is to cash as many tickets as we can, which in today's day of multi-race wagers and pick threes and pick fours and pick fives, which all the ADWs and the network coverage kind of lure people into, people have a tendency to want to use as many horses as they can to cover as many combinations as they can to cash as many tickets as they can. I don't believe that. I don't want to have it for 50 cents. I want to have it, depending on what my budget is, for $5, $10, $20, $50, $100, and use one horse or maybe two horses in, 2 or 3 legs of a pick 5 or something like that, or a pick 4. And if I'm right, make it count, because I've learned that if you can do that and be patient, when you hit, you erase a lot of losses that way. And it's worked for me over time. And I still do play that way today, although I don't play, quote, for a living. I do play to make scores and beat the game. I don't play this game recreationally or just to have fun. I want to win. So I still play that way. And it's a very aggressive way to play. And you have to be willing to turn the page, because I don't care how good you are at this game. Every one of us that plays this game consistently is going to be wrong a lot more than we're going to be right. How do you leverage that? When you're right, make it count. And don't make bets that put yourself behind the eight ball, because when you start, you're almost behind the eight ball. There's a lot of sharks in the water. There's a lot of information out there. There's all kinds of shenanigans that go on in the game today that a lot of people don't even realize. And there's takeout and CAWs and everything else that you're up against. So if you look at all of that, Chris, and then you factor in making not smart wagers, you've got no shot.
And that's what this show's all about, making smart wagers. So let's unpack a little bit of what you covered. First of all, you talked about dealing with that kind of the mental side of tough beats and losing streaks, especially when you're professional and you're, being able to pay the bills relies on, your success and your horseplay. How did you deal with that? I mean, is there anything you do specifically, or did you get better over time on how you kind of kept an even keel through the ups and the downs? Even the big scorers might throw you off, right? So how'd you?
Yeah, no, I absolutely. The pitfalls that you'll fall into is, okay, you hit a pick six or a pick four for, $80, $100, $120,000 or something like that. And all of a sudden, instead of betting, 500 or 1,000 a day, now you're betting 5,000 a day, and let me tell you, when that's your only income, you can go through money fast. I mean, I learned, I went from, and let's go back into the 90s. I went from $100,000 to $300,000 bankroll to, $300 bankrolls several times until I learned, listen, this is just not, going to work long term. And I learned, the hard way that I had to develop discipline. I had to develop, I don't want to really call it a system, but I would say more of a philosophy of how I'm going to approach and attack the game, and I had to stick to it. And a good example that I'll give you is when I stopped. I was really forced to stop playing the pick six because it ultimately became an extinct wager, and I gravitated to the pick four when it was a $2 bet and there was no pick five. Okay. And what I would do is I would bet $1,500 a day into the late pick four. Okay. And how I would structure my tickets back then, and we're probably going into the 90s. I don't remember when, early 90s, maybe mid 90s, around then. And I would figure out the late pick four at Naira, and I would say, okay, I was never an ABC guy in structuring my tickets. I would take a ticket where I used everybody I liked. Now, if that $1,500 allowed me to take that ticket for $5 or $10 or $20, I would figure it out, and I would structure one ticket where I felt pretty comfortable that I had everybody that I liked. And sometimes that would be my only wager. Now, I might have a single in the last leg, okay? And I would then take, at times, a second ticket that I would call a go-back ticket, where in the first three legs, assuming the single was in the last leg, I had the horses I liked better for an extra $20, $30 ticket, whatever that $1,500 budget allowed. Now, what I learned, and this was very tough to do, was let's say I get knocked out in the first, second, or third leg. I don't even get to my single, which had happened. I went home, okay? Even if that single was 3, 4, 5 to 1, I said, you know what? Not my day. I've got a $1,500 a day budget. I'm sticking to it. I lost. I wasn't right in the earlier races. I'm going to live to fight another day. A lot of times I watch those horses win. Sometimes I watch them lose. But when they won, it was like, why didn't I bet it? And it was because I learned that in the long run, if you stick to what's working for you, okay, at the end of the year, I was coming out in the black, nice money. So I wasn't going to tinker with that once I found a way of betting that was working for me. And anyone who ever asked me for advice, I say, listen, if you're coming out ahead at the end of the year and you're happy where you are, if it's not broke, don't fix it. You don't need any advice from me. But if you're losing or not winning as much as you think you could be, then, maybe you want to listen to somebody who's, been successful and had success at the game. Let's talk. And I'll try and help as many people as I can that are willing to listen. But it's a lot of discipline not to chase money, not to deviate from what you do that works. And even today that I've mastered it, and people that go to the races with me and my close friends that know me and know what I'm betting or not betting on a daily basis, every one of them will say, John, you're the most disciplined player that I know. And I'll give you a recent example. Last year I went to the Breeders' Cup. Okay. And on the Breeders' Cup, I like to bet, probably, one of my biggest betting days of the year. And let's say on Breeders' Cup, I like to bet maybe, 25,000. And I like to bet, I bet a lot less now than I did when I was really betting heavily, different games. So that's a rare day for me. Okay. That's 1 or 2 days a year, Derby Day, Breeders' Cup Day, not even Travers Day, it's just, certain days where I'll bet like that. This past year, there was nothing that I was in love with on Friday. And Saturday, I liked Goodnight Olive. That was my best bet in the Breeders' Cup. And I thought she was going to be the second choice to Echo Zulu. I truly did. And one of the reasons she might not have been is because of me. I told a couple of very big bettors that I didn't think there was any way, barring something unforeseen, that she was going to get beat. I decided, because of flight line, and every sequence is different and everything has to be, attacked differently. I said, you know what? I think Flightline's probably going to win. I think he's going to be the shortest priced classic favorite that I can probably remember, if not ever. I know he's got some soundness issues. He runs, 3, 4 times, whatever it is. I don't want to bet him, and I don't want to bet against him. So the late pick 4 and pick 5 really were not attractive to me, even the pick 6. So I bet a very small ticket on the early pick 5. I wound up having Caravel, who won at a very big price. And like an idiot, I didn't use Elite Power, Bill Mott's horse, who knocked me out of that early pick 5. But it was a very small ticket. Only would have had it, I think, for $3 or $4. And then I took the rest of my bankroll and I bet it all on Goodnight Olive. And she won, and I made my money. And I stood around with my friends and I watched the last 4 or 5 races, including a Flightline race, and all those other races without making a wager. And that takes discipline, especially I won. I had plenty of money to bet. But, there was just nothing I really wanted to go after. And there were horses I liked. I liked Modern Games a lot. I liked Rebels Romance a lot, but not enough at the prices they were to really step out. I wanted to make it count. Unfortunately, Goodnight Olive opened even money. I did bet early, which was probably a mistake, but I was involved in talking and this and that, and I didn't want to, have any issue. She wound up drifting up to 9-5. I still think, I thought she was going to be the second choice to Echo Zulu. I was wrong, but it was a short price, but I'll take it. It was a profitable day, and that's discipline. A lot of people can't do that, and I learned a long time ago that, for me, I have to do that. And still sometimes it's challenging, especially I think it's more challenging for me when I lose than when I win, because nobody wants to, walk away losing for the day. but I'll do it. I'll keep that mentality of live to fight another day.
So you said discipline a lot, and I think by that you mean you were very picky about choosing your spots and only making plays where you thought you had a significant edge. And then the other point you've made several times was you're not just trying to cash, you're trying to make a score every time you make a play. Is that a good summary, or you want to elaborate?
No, that's an excellent take, Chris. That's my philosophy. That's how I play the game. I try and make it count. I look at betting a race or a sequence as an investment, not as I mean, it's a gamble. But really, when you think about it, Chris, almost everything in life that we do financially is a gamble. Okay, if you I apologize. That's one of my
It sounds like he agrees with you.
he always he's a good guy, but when I make a bet, okay, like anything in life, you open up a business, it's a gamble. You open up a restaurant, it's a gamble. You play the stock market, it's a gamble. Even if you take a job, if you take a job with company A instead of company B, you're gambling company A is going to be successful and keep you. So I think that almost everything we do financially in life is somewhat of a gamble. So I try and make, my wagers accordingly, like it's an investment. I'm like, okay, this is worth investing my money. This sequence or race is not worth investing my money. And I try to hold to that. So I try and, pick my spots. I try and minimize the intangibles that are out there. And there are many, as you know. What's that old saying? There's a million ways to lose a race. There's one way to win one. That's probably an accurate statement. So, I try and minimize those intangibles. And, Tommy Hammer-Massis, who I know has been on your show, who's a friend of mine, and, we talk betting and philosophies a lot. And we agree on so many things, but one of the things that we differ on is I like to bet the most money on those big days, okay? Because I feel I have a much more level playing field where everybody's trying, everybody's in there to win, everybody's, at their best. Nobody's giving a horse a race. Nobody's, not fully cranked up, and that's one intangible I can minimize or eliminate on those days. I'd like to think, and I don't know, that this is going to sound naive or not, because I'm certainly not naive about anything when it comes to this game, but I'd like to think that any type of nefarious or cheating activity, I'm not going to say doesn't occur, but is minimized on those days. So I gravitate to those days. If I'm going to invest my money, could I make a score on Wednesday afternoon at Thistledown like anybody else? Yeah, probably so, but I'll stick to the big pools and the playing fields that I think are more level than the others. And that's why I enjoy investing my money on those days.
So let's talk a little bit about the big days. I'm going to come back to a few other things, but since you brought that up, you do like to target those big days. You increase the amount you're going to bet on those days. And we've got like the Derby coming up. So
yeah.
How will you attack that day, differently than a normal day at the races? Are you going to focus on the card, on the Derby itself? I mean, is there certain kinds of pools you like to play into?
I'll focus on the whole card. But for me, who really focused on the pick six and hit a lot of pick sixes over the years, that was really my bread and butter. The 2 days that I'll go after the pick six are a Kentucky Derby Day and Breeders' Cup Saturday. Now, last year was an exception because of the flight line scenario, so that was a rarity. But you deal with a flight line scenario once every 20 years, if that. So this year on Derby Day, I will definitely focus on the pick six, and then I will look at the entire card on Oaks and Derby Day, and I'll see where I have the best chance of making a score based on my opinion. I'll handicap all the races on both days. One thing I never do is I'm friends with a lot of trainers, a lot of riders. Any one of them that's friends with me, I'll tell you, I never ask. I don't want to know if they like their horse. I don't believe in, quote, information. You know, trainers talking about horses is like parents talking about their children. You know, they always have a subjective or biased opinion and never analyze it the way that I would like a race analyzed. So I bet on my own opinion only. So I'll do all the races both days, and I'll see where I think the best play and the best spot to invest my money is. Now, one of them will be the pick six, because I love the pick six wager, and it's one of only 2 days I get to really go after it.
Let's talk about the pick six, because I know you have had lots of success. It's not a wager we've really spent much time on in the previous podcast. So if you can talk a little bit about kind of your tactics and strategy and ticket structure, around the pick six, that would be really useful. I think the listeners will be real interested to hear that.
Well, it's a phenomenal wager, and I don't play the 20-cent ones, and even on the mandatory days, I don't play them. I'm just not a fan of that particular wager. I have done it a couple of times. I've hit some nice ones, but I generally avoid it. But the pick six itself, and the conventional pick six, and Derby Day and Breeders' Cup Day, I will attack it and go after it and try and make a score with it. And how I approach it is this, okay? I always like to have a single or two. I like to have a horse I really like, and if I'm going to bet, let's say 2,000 or 3,000 in the pick six, 4,000, 5,000, whatever the case may be, and I've bet that much, I bet more. The biggest pick six ticket I ever hit was the biggest bet in the pick six I ever hit, and I wound up winning it. So, I'm not afraid to put up a lot of money and go after it, but I like to have a single or two if I can find one. If not, so be it. But I like to have a single or two, which gives me a lot of room in the rest of the races, so I don't have to cut any horses from those races. So I like to go into it saying, if my single wins, or my single and the race I have two horses in, if I hit those two races, I got a hell of a shot. I'm very comfortable with my wager. So I try and do it that way. And if I can, I try and make it so my single is not, quote, everybody's single. Okay. Go back to last year as an example. I'm sure a lot of people up at the pick six last year singled Flightline. I didn't bet it, but if I did bet it, Flightline wouldn't have been my single. Okay. I would have definitely had two horses or three horses in there trying to beat the horse that everybody had, and having a different single. So that's pretty much how I approach it. And if you can't find a single and you don't have one that you're comfortable with, if you're going to bet 5,000 in a pick six, and you have a single that you're not willing to bet 5,000 on, if there was no pick six, or you weren't playing it, then that probably shouldn't be your single. And you probably shouldn't go after the sequence. But I like to structure my ticket in a way that if my single or short race wins, or both short races win, then I feel comfortable that, barring something fluky, which can always happen, barring something fluky, I'm going to hit. And it's funny. Most people like to talk about their big wins. Okay. And I've had some, several, six-figure days. I remember more and talk more about my losses, just for some reason. And, one of my most silly losses is I almost never use all. I always approach a race thinking there's got to be one or two I can eliminate here, and instead of having it, once, put the ticket in twice or something like that. But a couple of years ago, when Order of Australia won, I think the mile, and Aidan O'Brien ran 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, whatever it was, Chris. I used all the other Aidan O'Briens. I think there were 14 horses in the race. I think I had 11 of them in the pick 5 or whatever that sequence was. I don't remember. But I left out 3 horses. One of them was Order of Australia, who knocked me out. So you got to be willing to do that. You know what I mean? But again, I'm not betting the pick 5 for 50 cents. I'm going to have it a couple of times. So eliminating a horse or 2 or 3 or 4 from any sequence or any potential all race is valuable to me, because it may free me up to have it, more than one time. And again, the wins will erase those losses, especially if you have them a couple of times. So it's not a way for everybody to play. And people that say, "Hey, listen, John, share your ticket with me. I want to put it in." Now, when I was playing for a living, I would not do that, but now I will, especially on those days. And I'll tell people, I'll say, "Listen, I'm willing to risk it and lose. You might not. You know what I mean? I'm willing to bet against a 4 to 5 or 3 to 5 shot and not even have them on the ticket if I don't think they're going to win." A lot of people are not willing to do that. I mean, who's going to bet, let's say, a smaller better's budget is going to bet $200 in a pick 6, and there's a 3 to 5 shot in one of the legs. They're not going to want to leave that horse out. If I don't like him, I'm not putting him on the ticket. Doesn't bother me. If he wins, okay, I was wrong. I'm willing to do that. That takes a different mindset than a lot of people have. So I like to attack it. I'll give you an example of how sometimes it all comes down to, Chris, putting yourself in position. If you know you're a pretty good handicapper and you know how to bet and you put yourself in position, you're going to connect. All right. A couple of years ago, when Authentic won the Kentucky Derby, I didn't bet a lot into the pick 6 and the pick 5 because I didn't think that I had to. And I wasn't in love with the sequence, but I wound up betting for both races. For both sequences, I only invested about $1,000. Okay. Digital Age, who won at 7 or 8 to 1, won the turf race before the Derby. That was my single. Okay. And he won. Now, I was only alive in the Derby with 2 horses. I was alive with Sol Volante and Honor AP. Okay. If Sol Volante, who was like 25 to 1, happened to win the Derby on a less than $1,000 investment, I hit for 1.1 million between the pick 5 and the pick 6. If Honor AP wins, who we'll talk a little bit more about in a second, if he wins, I was winning about half. I was collecting about 550,000 on the pick 5 and the pick 6. Now, to put yourself in that position on about $1,000 investment is an accomplishment in and of itself. I lost, and I knew right out of the gate I was in trouble. I was very confident going in, and when they broke out of the gate, they hadn't run 70 yards or a 16th of a mile, and I was like, oh, well, today's not the day. One was last. The other one was next to last. They would have had to make up like 30 runs to win. In the aftermath, a lot of people brought to my attention, and I looked it up. Honor AP actually came home faster than anybody else in the race and ran further feet-wise, according to trackers, than anybody else in the race. So theoretically, had he broke better and been closer, maybe he could have nailed Authentic. I don't know. He never looked like it to me, but some people whose opinions I do respect as sharp handicappers say, you know what? With a better trip, you might have lucked out and hit that day. Now, of course, I was disappointed not to win, but I don't cry over it anymore because I say, you know what? This one wasn't my day. It's only a matter of time. And, a hit or two like that over the course of 2-3 years erases a lot of losses, especially when you're betting less money now than, I used to bet, but still going after those big type of scores.
So that's really interesting. I just want to follow up on a few things you said. First of all, in terms of ticket structure, it sounds like to get interested in a pick 6, you usually want 1 or 2 legs where you can be skinny, single, or maybe 2 horses, and also have some opinion that's counter to the crowd. You want to have 1 or 2 races where you can be tight and you're not, singling the obvious single, right?
Right. And tight and confident. You know what I mean? Like not like, well, I'm just gonna take a shot tight. Like I loved the digital age that day. I bet him to win because I knew what if he wins and then I don't hit the Derby because the Derby's a tough race. But if I was alive with, let's say, half a dozen horses in the Derby, I might not have bet him to win. But I knew, I was going in confident to the Derby, but I only had two, and we know how tough the Derby is. So I did bet him to win. But yeah, I want to be, to go after the pick six. I want to be skinny or singled in one or two races, and confidently so.
And then in the other races, you don't try to get too cute. You try to eliminate horses, but the horses you think are the contenders, you're probably going to spread in those, and you're trying to get the value in those other two legs, and then just manage to survive the rest. Is that kind of the approach?
Well, I don't want it to say that. I don't want it to say survive. I want if I'm going to bet the sequence, I've got to be confident. You know what I mean? If there's one race where I'm like, you know what, I got no idea what's going to happen here. I probably won't go after it. Unless I could use enough horses where I feel covered. And, I've got a philosophy about that. A lot of people say, I use all these horses and I don't win. And I think we lose a lot of the races that we're very deep in, as opposed to the races that we're narrow in the multi-race bets, Chris, because I think a lot of times when you feel like you have to go 7 or 8 deep in a 10-horse field or 8 or 9 deep in a 12-horse field, what does it tell us? It tells us that you really don't have a strong opinion. That's when you get beat, when you don't have a strong opinion a lot of the time. So, if I'm that deep, or if I'm only 3 or 4 deep, I've got to feel like I'm going to win. If I feel like, I just got to survive, it's not the sequence for me. I want to feel better than that. I want to feel like if my small races win or my short races win, I want to feel like I should bring this home.
So you need to be confident in those other legs, but you're not trying to. You're focused more on just making sure you've got the main contenders and you feel confident with the horses you've chosen. You can get through that leg. If you feel like you don't really have an opinion, you have to spread too much, you may just pass the sequence.
Correct. And let me tell you, sometimes, I've bet a lot of money. I've bet, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 pick sixes, where let's say there's a race with, 10 horses in it. I may not have the favorite or second choice, and I may use 6 horses if I don't like them. I'm not afraid to do that. So when you say main contenders, I'd say my main contenders. They may not necessarily be the public's main contenders. But I've got to have my main contenders in those other legs that I'm spreading in order to feel comfortable and be able to do it on a ticket that's, within my budget, and I think the sequence warrants. If I look at a sequence and I like everything, but it looks to me like, there's about a 90% chance that this thing just chalks out all across the board, I don't want to bet 5, 6, 7,000 in a pick six that I think that's likely to happen in. I'll pass it up. I got to feel like, we're going to beat a couple of key favorites, and we can go against them with confidence. And if I don't like them, I won't put them on the ticket. If I like them and my ticket can sustain that because of my singles, I'm like, okay, I could use the 8-5 shot, even though I'm using 5 horses in the race, because I think he's got the best chance or a very realistic chance of winning. I could use him. I don't have to toss him because my single or short races offer me the value to do that, where if I hit it, even if he wins with the amount of horses I'm using, I'm still going to be okay.
Okay, so on the pick six, and we're talking about a normal pick six, like with a $1 or $2 minimum, not a 20-cent pick six. Are you betting just to hit it once then? You're not trying to.
Usually, yes. Occasionally, I'll go back at a second ticket with some key horses. But the way that I bet, if my small ticket wins, automatically I got it twice because my big ticket won. I'll never have like a scenario where I've got all the horses but on two separate tickets. Like, you know what I mean? Am I explaining that properly? Like I'll
Yeah.
never
So yeah. So I
hedge.
mean, on your tickets, are you playing just one ticket then, where you have your single and your skinny legs and your spread just in one, or do you split it out into multiple tickets? And if
No,
so, how do you do that?
one ticket, and then what I may do is may go back and just play a second ticket that has the horses I like best. So my main ticket is my main ticket, and I'll be a little deeper into deeper races. The smaller ticket or the secondary ticket, if it's a sequence, I do that in. I don't always do that, but what I call that my go back ticket. I go back at certain key horses. You know, if that ticket wins, that means I automatically hit both of them. If the go back ticket wins, I have to hit the big ticket too. I'll never leave the door open to have all the horses on both tickets, but not together, you know?
So let me summarize what I heard you say, and you can correct me or add to it. When you're tackling the pick six, you set aside your discipline is there's only a certain amount you're going to play, and you're going to look at the sequence. If you don't like it, you're not going to play. That's part of the discipline part. But if you do find a couple races where you've got a strong opinion and where you can go, pretty tight, ideally a single or two singles, or narrow it down to two horses, and those aren't the same horses everyone else is going to be playing in the leg. You're getting some value in those two key legs, I'll call them. And then the other legs, you're comfortable enough that you've zeroed in on contenders, keeps the ticket affordable, and you've got an opinion where you have some confidence you're going to be able to hit it. You'll play it on one ticket. You're not playing a bunch of ABC types tickets. You're playing one ticket, and then you might press with a smaller ticket, just to hit it again, with the top horses you like in each leg. Is that kind of how you approach it?
That's exactly how I approach it.
Okay, so the question I have then for you is, are you, like, if you're playing the pick six, and I think you've answered it, but you can maybe expand on it a bit. You've also looked at those races, and you might be playing other pools, like other vertical, horizontal pools. And if so, what other pools do you like to attack other than, like a pick six or a pick five or a pick four?
Well, yeah, I definitely like the pick fives. And like I said, the example I used with Digital Age and Sol Volante and Honor AP, I hit the first leg of the pick six. I went back and pressed with the pick five, same horses. So I was going to hit both because it was Derby day. It was a big pool. And, I wasn't using the favorites in the Derby. So it paid for me to do that. But I love win bets and I love exactors. And how I bet that is probably different than most people too. Like, let's, for argument's sake, say I like the 2 horse. Okay, number 2. I may bet the 2 to win, and then I'll bet the exactors 2-4, 2-7. I never box. I never reverse. So I'm all in. I bet 2 with 4-7 and the 2 to win, and that's it. And that's how I'll bet win and exacta. And I love betting that way. I've got 1,000,001 reasons why I bet that way and don't box and don't reverse. But it goes back to what we discussed earlier. And again, it's not for everybody. A lot of people like to box 3 horses. I won't do that. I'll pick the one that I like. Like a $1 box is what? $6, and it's got 5 losing bets and the takeout to start. Okay, so like we discussed, you're already starting behind the 8 ball. I won't do that. I'll take the one I like the best over the other two $3 exactas. And like I said early, my philosophy, I'll cash less tickets, but at the end of the year or the end of the meet, I'll win more money because I've got them for $3 when you've got them for $1, and I'll wind up hitting as many as you in the long run. So, and I don't mean you personally, I'm just saying that the average player. So that's how I do it. So I'm minimizing my losing bets. I'm minimizing putting myself behind the 8 ball. I'm focusing on discipline and maximizing and making it count when I'm right. and I'm willing to cash less to win more. So it's a mentality that for me, I have to beat the game. There are some people that'll box and say sometimes it's okay to box. And like I said, if you're winning money at the end of the year and you're happy doing what you're doing, if it's not broke, don't fix it. You know, you don't need to learn from anybody if you're winning money at this game. It's a very tough thing to do. But if you're not, I tell people all the time, if you're boxing horses, try it my way for 6 months and see what happens. And the people that have tried it and stuck to it with discipline have all come back and tell me, you're 100% right. My game is so much better now. I'll never go back to playing the other way.
So it sounds like you really are focused on picking winners. And even in your vertical bets, you're playing exactas with your winner on top. And you may be you might be playing horizontals with doubles or pick 3, pick 4, pick 5, pick 6, but you're really focused on those winners, and you're trying to find those horses that are going to come in on top that offer value, and then maybe look to, the best way to leverage that. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. That is fair to say. That's what I'm good at. I remember a couple of years ago. I know you're very active in tournaments. I'm not really a tournament player. It's just, old dog, new tricks kind of thing, But a couple of years ago, I played in the handicapping for horses tournament up at Saratoga, okay, where you had to make a $20 win bet, I think, on one horse every day at a meet. And there were a bunch of professional handicappers in the tournament, and whoever had the most money at the end of the year won. And I remember going into it. So my partner at Past the Wire at the time, Nick's like, he goes, with Past the Wire, and your reputation in handicapping, you better win. So I said to him, I says, Nick, I says, there's no way I'm not going to win. He goes, what are you talking? I says, when it comes to that over the course of a meet, there's nobody out there that will beat me. Over the course of a day, yeah, I might lose. Over the course of a weekend or a week, but the whole Saratoga meet, everybody picks a horse every day. There's no shot that we lose. And I jumped out to a big lead, and about halfway through it, people were commenting, "Oh, John's home. Forget it. Nobody's going to win," because people were following it every day. It was a lot of fun. There were a lot of media people involved. And at the end, Michael Baychak, who's a big tournament player, he was making a late run, trying to catch me. So I was like, don't worry, don't worry. And the last day, he almost caught me, but he fell short, and I did manage to win it. That kind of format is where I would excel because of what you said. I focus on being right. Now there, you're limited to $20, so it was just a matter of, picking nice price winners over the course of a meet, more so than the other players. But on a day-to-day basis, yeah, I survive and make my scores off being right and making it count enough times over the course of a year to really come out ahead.
So the other part of your discipline, it sounded like you sort of do what Mike Maloney talked about last week on the podcast, and that is you kind of set a daily limit that you're not going to go over, and then you look at the card and decide how you're going to allocate that across that. Is that true, or?
No, not anymore. I was doing that, like I said, with the pick 4 and the $1,500. Now at this point, it really all depends on the card and the sequence and how strong my opinion is. The way I bet, like you look at these CAW players that are betting hundreds of thousands a day. Okay, if you gave me free and said, John, tomorrow tomorrow? No, I'm running. Now I'm betting Keeneland. So if you said, John, on Wednesday you could bet $500,000 at Keeneland, I'd say, Chris, I can't bet $500,000 at Keeneland on Wednesday the way that I bet. I would be betting against myself. So every sequence and every day is different. I don't, those guys that are betting all these tracks, all these different things, all the power to them. That's just not how I play. But at this point, I could bet 200, I could bet 2,000, I could bet 10,000. It all depends on how the particular card stacks up, how strong my opinion is, what the odds are on my horse. I mean, if I have a very strong opinion on a horse that's a big price, I'll go outside my comfort zone and take a shot, because that's what I play the game for. So I don't, at this particular point in my career, I don't have a set budget that I'll play on a day. I will say that I find it more because of some of the points I made. Okay, nefarious aspects of the game, a lot of sharks in the water, a lot of different types of edges and information out there. The game just being overall tougher than it ever was. Even legal drugs and legal therapeutic drugs that didn't exist in the 90s and the early 2000s that are widely used today have changed the landscape tremendously. So I now actually enjoy betting less money and making a hit. Like, I love betting $200, $300, $400 into a pick five, having it for $5. It pays 4,000, 3,000 or something like that, and winning, 20,000, and, watching people bet, 10 times that into it and not bringing home as much money. I love betting against the people that bet what they call the Cowboy Style tickets. I think that's a recipe for disaster long term.
Expand on that. I'm not familiar. What's a Cowboy Style ticket?
Cowboy ticket is what they call, a guy who bets a 50-cent pick five for $600. You know what I mean? And he's got 5 by 7 by 8 by 4 by 4. You know what I mean? Or some number like that. That's what I would call, and certain people call it Cowboy Style ticket. It's just, just a term that's thrown around. I don't bet that way. I love betting against those guys because in the long run, they will annihilate themselves. You don't have to worry about it. They're just seeding the pools as far as I'm concerned. Even when they hit, like, one example I'll throw up is a friend of mine that I know that bets that way, and I try to tell him all the time not to do it. So about a year ago, time flies, he hits a pick five on one of those tickets, and it pays $5,000. He bet like $500-600 into it. Okay. And he loved the horse. He talked about this was the best bet of the day. He can't lose. I love this horse. He's going to win, blah, blah, blah. And he winds up using only 2 horses in that race. So it's like, you see, my style, I won 5,000. I says, right. Your style, you won 5,000 in your mind. In my mind, you lost 5,000. He says, how do you figure? I said, because you used 2 horses in a race, you love the horse. You single that horse, you bet it twice, you collect 10,000. In the long run, that 10,000 will make up for the losing wages if you bet less and hit for more. And I firmly believe that math will ultimately right itself if you stick to it and you have a good opinion. But he just can't grasp it. He can't get himself to do it. And even though he sees it, he says, sometimes I see it and you're right. I still just mentally can't get myself to bet that way. And a lot of people can't. A lot of people. My dad was that way. When my dad was a mutual clerk and I would bet at his window and I would bet 1,000 to win on the 5, $500 Exacta, 5-1, 5-3. He goes, how do you not reverse this for $100? I'm like, Dad, you know me by now. How many years you've been watching me bet? I don't reverse. And I'd walk away. And he would get mad at me. And if it came in the other way, it was a long ride home because I would hear it the whole way. You're stubborn, you're hard-headed, you're this. I disagree. That's how I attack the game. If I bet in Exacta for $100, ice cold one way, okay, as opposed to betting it for 80 and turning it for 20, if it wins and I only have it for 80, I feel like I cost myself a $20 Exacta. I don't want to do that. I want to be right as much as I can and make it count as much as I can. And at the end of the day, I think that gives me the best chance of beating a game that's a skill game, but very, very difficult to beat. And hey, Chris, I beat it for a long time playing that way. So, you know, it's hard for people that are not beating it or haven't done it for as long as I have, and you know, or somebody that's, you know, eking out a small, you know, couple of percentage ROI. I didn't eke out a couple of percentage ROI. I had to pay my bills off what I won. You know what I mean? I can't just eke out a small positive ROI. I had to make it count, and to me, that's the only way I know how to play the game. Is it for everybody? No, I understand that. I don't encourage people to play the way that I play. I'll tell people it's not for everybody. You have to have a very tough mentality about gambling to do it that way. But I think if you can do it and stick to it and weather the bad times, there's a good shot you'll better your play in the long run.
So let's talk a little bit about on the win bets. It sounds like you're willing to bet like a 9 to 5 shot you love, like Goodnight Olive, or longer price horses. Is there sort of a sweet spot, a certain range of odds, or is it just any time you think you might have value that you go into the win pool?
It's a tough question for me to answer accurately. It all depends. I mean, you know, Goodnight Olive was a little shorter price than I like to bet to win. Okay. But I didn't expect her to be that price. It was Breeders' Cup day. I thought she was going to be 3-1, 7-2. When she opened up even money, I was like, wow, I definitely told the wrong people, and I knew who they were. And I said, but it's Breeders' Cup day. She'll still go off what I think she'll drift up. She did, but not to what I thought she would. And I was already committed to that. And, you know, I took it because I was extremely confident. But as far as being a sweet spot, no. Like I said, I like when the horse that I like is longer odds than shorter odds, and I'll bet more on a longer price horse than a shorter price horse because, like I said, I want to make it count. One thing that'll make me sometimes reduce my bet. It won't back me off entirely, but you know, I've been doing it long enough to know certain betting trends, and you know, pretty much most of the time, Goodnight Olive, I was wrong, but most of the time, I have a good idea what a horse is going to go off or should go off. So if a horse is, in my opinion, ice cold on the board, and I know it's a betting outfit, and, you know, there's just something not right, I won't let that horse beat me if I think they're going to win. I'll still bet, but I might reduce my bet and reduce my enthusiasm because something's, you know, just doesn't look right. But I'll still bet. And sometimes I'll be, you know, stubborn and say, you know what, I'm going to go with my opinion. And even though this one's cold on the board and I think, you know, should be 5-1 and they're 9-1, taking no money in the exotics or anything like that, I'll still press, you know. But sometimes I will notice that and it will back me off. Sometimes it won't. I guess it depends on the circumstances and just one of the betters intangibles in this game, which I happen to believe strongly in, is sometimes you got to trust your gut. You know, so if your gut's telling you something's not right, you know, trust it. Sometimes if your gut's telling you, you know, they're wrong and you're right, I'll go with that. You know what I mean? Like, you know, even though they're cold on the board, I'll still press my opinion.
So it sounds like you're still trying to really make a score even on the win pool, but if you're really confident in a shorter priced horse, you're still willing to play it if you think there's value there.
Correct.
But typically you're looking for a little bit, you know, you're trying not to get the lower price range. You're looking for that value a little higher price on in most cases.
Right. And one thing that I do that a lot of people that are very successful don't do, okay, and will disagree with me, and probably some of the people that you've had on the show and will have on the show will probably disagree with me on this, okay? But when we're talking about favorites, okay, I will not bet against a favorite because well, I don't like this horse at that price. I like it at 2-1. I don't like it at 8-5 or 7-5. I'll either not bet or I'll bet it anyway. I'm not afraid to bet or single a favorite if that's who I like. I look not to for the value aspect, but I won't bet against my own opinion. If my opinion is that the favorite is going to win the race, I'm not betting against that horse. I always make, one of the things I'll always say is, and a lot of bettors will disagree with this and say I'm wrong, but to me, there's no value at all in a losing wager. You know, you could bet 2,000 on a 10-1 shot that you think had as good a chance as the 6-5 shot. If you lost, there's no value. If the 6-5 shot beats you, I'd rather have 2,000 at a 6-5 shot and collect 4,200 than 2,000 on a 10-1 shot and say, well, yeah, I made the smarter bet, but you lost. Now, if I think they both have the same chance, or I think the 10-1 shot has a better chance, obviously I'm going to do what anybody who's played this game long enough is going to do. But if I don't think that, I won't take the longer shot just because it's the longer shot if I don't think the horse has a realistic chance of beating the favorite. I won't bet against my own opinion. I won't let the money and the public's opinion and the odds make my opinion for me.
Well, yeah, I think one of the things you're saying that I think is a good point is, a value isn't necessarily a long shot, right? A value is when you're getting a better price than you think the horse warrants. You expect the horse has a 50-50 chance to win. You're getting 2-1. There's value, even though it's 2-1.
Correct.
Just because the horse is 20-1 doesn't mean it's a value play unless you think it has a better than a 20-1 chance of winning. Is that
exactly? Just to use it because it's 20-1. If you know what I mean, if it should be 30 or 50-1, or if it's a horse that you really think has hardly any chance at all, I don't care what the price is. I don't want to bet a horse like that. Well, he should be 20-1 and he's 50-1. But if I don't think he could win, I don't care if he's 100-1. I don't want to invest on.
No, that makes perfect sense. So I want to talk a little bit. We talked about win and the pick six, but you mentioned exactas and you don't like to box. You just like to key your win horse with maybe one or two others underneath. What gets you interested in the exacta? What are you looking for on those other horses after you've got a key horse on top?
Well, I think those are the ones that are going to be running, the biggest threats to my horse. The ones that if I was betting a pick 3 or pick 4, the other ones that I'd be worried about turning for home. Those are the ones that I would want to use for second, and I'll usually limit it to 2 or 3. If I've got to use more than 2 or 3, it's not for me. And I don't reverse them. Like I told you, I don't box them. I just take my horse on top with 2 or 3 for second. Now, here's where I differ from people, and I get a little strange. And here's where I will use all, and I'll tell you why, okay? Let's say I'm going to attack one race, okay, because my style is to attack. So let's say I don't like the pick 4, I don't like the pick 5, I don't like the multi-race sequence, but I love this horse that's 6 or 7-1, okay? Here's a typical bet for me, okay? 1,000 to win on the 6 or 7-1 shot, all right? $200 exactas with the 6 or 7-1 shot on top of 2 horses. So now I'm in for 1,400, right? Then I'll take $1 superfecta, my horse with the 2 horses that I have in the exacta with all. They repeat that 2 or 3 times. Then I'll take, let's say, $5 triple, my horse with the same 2 horses second in the exacta with all in the third spot. Why do I do it that way? Okay. I believe that you can handicap for win You can handicap and study and have an opinion on who's going to run second or who has the best chance to run second. And I kind of gave you away how I look at that. I look at that as who are the horses I think have the best chance of beating my horse. So I'm not really handicapping for second. I'm just identifying who the threats to my top choice are, in my opinion. I don't believe anybody, no matter how good you are, can handicap for third or fourth. So I'm willing to use all in the third or fourth slot. Reason being, who stops riding at the 16th pole when they know they're not going to win? Who wraps up? Who figures, you know what, I can't win, I'm not this? Who's not all out? Who eased up before the wire? I mean, there's just so many things that happen in the third or fourth slot that I don't want to have to worry about if I'm right on everything else, okay? If somebody tells me, I handicapped this race and, I got this horse for first, I got this one for second, and, I got these three for third, I laugh at that. I mean, to me, that I can't get my arms around that. How you can have an opinion on who's going to run third. If you've watched as many races as I have, and you think you can pick who's going to run third or fourth, all the power to you. You know what I mean? I won't knock anybody or what they think, works for them or what may work for them. But for me, I don't believe that anybody in this game can handicap who's going to run third or fourth.
The way I talk about that, I don't know if I necessarily agree with what you said, but I agree with what you said about, to me, when you're betting to win, your incentives are aligned with all the connection of the horse. The owner, the trainer, the rider, they all want to win. So if they're in a position to win, they're probably going to try unless something real nefarious is going on, and I'm not going to go there. So you've kind of got their incentives aligned with yours. Once you get down to like third or fourth, their incentives might be to just, the horse is beat. I don't want to, abuse him. I don't want to, it's not a big deal. He's not in contention to win. And you no longer have that alignment between your incentives, because you need that horse to finish third to hit the try, and their incentives. So is that kind of what you're hinting at there? Is that...
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. So I think you are actually agreeing with me. There are just so many things that can happen in the third and fourth slot. I mean, in the first slot too, obviously in the second, but I just think there are so many more that can happen in the third or fourth slot. And, if a horse is in contention to win, it's a lot less likely a rider is going to ease up before the wire than if a horse is, mid-pack or in the back, and he says, you know what, I got no shot today, so he's not going to really go all out, where if he did, he could have gotten third, but he didn't because he had no shot to win. So he just said, you know what, I'm going to let him gallop out and maybe we'll get him next time. Which is that's not even really nefarious when you think about it. A lot of people, and especially in social media, get mad at stuff like that. But if they knew how many maidens that they've bet on over the course of their career, where the instructions to the rider was, listen, today he's not really cranked up, he needs a race, let's keep him out of trouble, give him a little education, we'll crank him up next time, you'll ride him back and we'll go. And because it's a hot trainer or a hot connection or a hot sire, and he's 6 or 7 to 1 on the board, and sometimes those horses jump up and win anyway, but a lot of times they don't, and we've all bet on them. That's not really nefarious. It's an inherent part of the game, Chris, and it happens every day, whether we like to talk about it or not, but it's part of the game. And in the third or fourth slot, you're much more vulnerable to things like that. So if I'm betting a superfecta, like I said, I like to minimize my chance of losing and make it count. And by going all in the third or fourth slot, maybe you catch a 50 or 60 to 1 shot that you wouldn't have caught had you not done that, so it just makes sense for me in the third and fourth slot, where it doesn't in a regular multi-race wager on the win end. On the win end, I like to think I can eliminate at least 1 or 2 or 3.
So yeah, and that makes sense. And when I said nefarious, I didn't mean those kinds of examples you gave. That was more like they're trying to stiff a horse or something.
Right.
But I'm just saying that the incentives are, like you said, they want to live to fight another day. They don't want to push the horse too hard if it's dead tired. even if you could hang on for third, or like you said, it's so far out of it, it's not going to win, and we're just going to, gallop in and go for the next one. I was just saying, maybe sometimes horses get held up or whatever, but that wasn't what I meant. So
Right.
So it sounds like you're on the verticals, you're like a pure pyramid player. You're going to put your key horse on top. You may have a couple other contenders for second, and you may play that exacta. And then in your tries, you're not going to do any reversing or anything. You're going to have to hit that winner and those two in second, and then you may spread in the third and fourth legs, may even go all. But it's just kind of a pure pyramid with your top horse on top, your other choice is second, and then you spread below that.
Right. I'll give you one variation or caveat to that, because you're spot on with how I play. But let's say it's a day like Derby Day, okay? And let's say or Oaks, like the Derby Supers, we know come back ridiculous, right? On occasion, okay? There's always some 30 or 40 to 1 shot sneaks in there, makes it really big. So let's say it's one of those days, okay? And I like a horse that's 7 or 8 to 1 in the Derby, okay? I may take my horse in the first slot in the Super, 2 or 3 for second, all. Then I'll say, you know what? It's Derby Day. Let's go outside the box. Then I'll take those 3 horses for second with my horse in the second slot with all. So now I got him first and second. So I am kind of reversing in the superfecta. I won't do it in the exacta, but in the superfecta, sometimes I'll get a little cute, a little outside the box, and I'll do that. And I have done that on occasion and hit some big supers by doing that in all 4 slots. It winds up getting costly, but sometimes I will do that on those crazy potential superfecta days, the Derby being one of them, the Breeders' Cup being the other, because you can get away with it on those days where you might not be able to get away with it on a Wednesday afternoon at Gulfstream Park.
And that 20 horse field, the potential payouts are astronomical compared to a normal day, right? In the superfecta, it's a $1 minimum where players can't really spread the way you are doing, typically with their budgets, and so the number of possibilities are really large. So that's why maybe you spread a little bit more, but still have that chance for the monster score, and your return on investment is going to be immense regardless, right?
Right, exactly right. And listen, some days I'll get burned, okay? I did that. Okay, like I told you, I'll always talk about my bad beats more so than my wins. Giacomo won the Derby at a ridiculous price, okay? I keyed Giacomo first and second with 4 or 5 horses in the Derby superfecta, and third, and I wound up messing the ticket up because I didn't have closing argument in whatever slot it was that he was in. I don't remember if he ran second or third, whatever it was, but the way I made my bet, I was having a disastrous day, and I tried to get cute with the superfectas and keyed Giacomo and didn't have closing argument, who ran a big race, and I wound up walking out, tearing up all the tickets, and my dad was still alive then, and it was such a long walk to the car because anytime, when he would give me a lot of praise, and he's the one that called me the Pick Six King. But when I was wrong and lost, I would hear that hard head the whole way home and the whole walk to the car. And that was just, one of those days where my way of betting burnt me, and it will happen. It'll happen to me again. It's happened to me before, but the wins will far outweigh, those. That's one of the great things about this game, Chris, is, when we're right and we make it count, it's a very satisfying and financially rewarding feeling.
Definitely. And then that Derby Super is one that it tends to pay every year. I think the $1 minimum, and in the large field just creates real opportunity there if you can bet efficiently and hit that.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent for larger minimums. I loved when the pick 4 was a $2 base. I wish they would go back to that. I think the pick 5 should be the same thing. I think it forces people to take an opinion, and that's what I like to do. Okay, it's a pari-mutuel game. All right, we're playing against each other in reality. All right, we're playing against the other people in the pool. I'd rather play against people that are forced to take an opinion and back their opinion than people that just have big bankrolls and can take 50 cents and cover everything. And I've never done the math or studied it, and I don't know if like the Thoroughbred Idea Foundation and Pat and Craig ever studied it, but I would bet, just based on my own general observations, that the pick 4s at Naira and the other tracks that have gone from $2 to 50 cents generally pay a lot less than they do with a $2 base. And I know the pools get bigger with the 50 cents, and maybe it shouldn't be that way, but I believe that they pay less.
I think a lot of people agree with that and would like to see go to the higher, back to the higher minimums. I mean, there can be a case made both ways, but I think certainly in the more exotic wagers, it really tilts things towards the computer teams that can really bet efficiently and can weight their plays.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we talked about the last thing I want to cover, like on the different pools. It sounds like you really gravitate towards like the pick 4, 5, and 6, but are you much of a doubles or a pick 3 player if you like, adjacent races? How do you play those at all?
There's just so many things you can go after on a card, so generally I love to have, I'll always look for a race or two where I could bet my win in Exacta. I'll always look at the pick 5 and the pick 6 and the pick 4 if I like that sequence. Generally, I'll cut it off there. Doubles, I think, are a great bet. If I like back-to-back races a lot and I don't like the pick 4 or pick 5 sequence, I might be inclined to do that. It's interesting that you brought it up, because I have found lately, because I actually get pickier as I get older in my spots, okay, and even more selective. So now I find myself betting more pick 3s, and thinking, well, everybody's going after the late pick 4 and pick 5. I'm going to skip that altogether, especially if I think the favorites are very live in the first 2 legs. I say, you know what? I'm going to skip that altogether. Maybe I'll avoid some of the Sharks. Maybe I'll avoid some of the CAWs, that will all be going into the pick 4 and the pick 5s. And I'll just go after the pick 3, because I like the last 3 races, and I really don't like the first leg of the pick 4 or the pick 5. And I find myself doing that more now than I ever did in the past.
So you're trying to kind of expand your portfolio of plays and really try to sync it up with what your opinion is on the sequence?
Exactly. So I may, on a day, Saturday, when everybody's betting to pick 4 and to pick 5 and loving it, if I don't like those first 2 legs, or I think the favorites are very live, or there's a heavy favorite in one of those 2 legs that I think is tough to get around, I may say, you know what? The last 3 legs, I like prices. I think there's a lot of value. Instead of starting with the 4 to 5 shot or the 3 to 5 shot, I'll just, bet it multiple times and go after the pick 3 and create a little value and maybe dodge the CAW players and just get a much bigger return than the parlay on those 3 races, which now on the pick 4s and pick 5s, nothing is to me a worse feeling than when the pick 5 or the pick 4 comes back, equal to or less or just a little bit more than the parlay. Because I remember when they used to always be much more than the parlay. So you'll see that happen a lot in the pick three now, because I think there's not as many sharks going after those pick threes. So again, it comes to adapting and going outside the box.
So any other examples of how you have sort of shaped your play in response to the changes that have occurred, in the last 10 years or so, that you want to talk about?
I think we covered everything that I've adapted, and pretty much the way I approach the game today, which is based, twofold. One on, the evolution of the sport and wagering, and then one on my own personal evolution to just, have a different philosophy about it now, and not be in a position where if I don't win, I don't eat. I was in that position for a long time, not being in that position it takes a little bit of the pressure off and allows me to play the game. I mean, I still play it very aggressively and not like most people, but differently than I did a long time ago. I mean, I remember when I used to go to the races, people would tell me that, oh, John, you're so unapproachable. You don't sit with anybody. You don't talk to anybody. I'm like, hey, I'm not there to socialize. I'm there to, earn a living. So it was very, very different for me, Chris, than it was for most people. And, back then, I want to say the early 90s, I would say there were maybe a dozen, 15 people across the country that were known as the ones who were like beating the game and doing very well at the game. And we all kind of knew who each other was and, what tracks we were based out of. And, word always got around. And, I was fortunate enough and worked hard enough to be one of those guys for a long time. And, I remember a day at Calder, I used to bet with a particular clerk at Calder that called me over one day. And he said, John, he goes, I just want to tell you something so you hear it from me. And I'm like, what, Artie? His name was Artie. And I said, what? He goes, after you leave my window, a lot of times people will come over and they'll offer me $20, $30 to know who you bet. And I always tell them the same thing. I never take the money, and I always tell them, if you want to know who we bet, go over and ask them. I'm like, it's interesting because none of them ever do. So he just laughed, and we laughed about it. He goes, but I just didn't want you to hear from anybody that I was telling anyone or doing anything like that. But it does happen, and I tell them all the same thing, and I never tell them. And I'm like, I appreciate that, Artie. Thank you. That's what I would have expected from you, to tell you the truth. But none of them ever asked me, and it's because I was not there to talk and socialize, and it was a very, very serious thing to me. Now I go past the wire. People recognize me that I don't even know. Come say hello. I talk. I'm friendly with everybody because I'm not in that situation. I do take it very seriously. I do sit by myself when I go to the Derby, the Breeders' Cup. I get my own table. I sit by myself and I focus. I don't want anyone at my table. I don't want anybody talking to me, asking me who I like, race to race, or anything like that. I don't want to know who anybody likes, and I really don't want to discuss what I'm betting. I don't post tickets anymore. I don't think that's really anybody's business, but mine and maybe my accountant. I don't know, but I'm just different than a lot of players like that. I can be alive for 100,000 or 200,000, and they're head bobbing to the wire, and I could be standing at the Breeders' Cup right next to you, Chris. And unless you know me very well, now you're going to know what to look for because I'm going to tell you. But unless you know me very well, you won't know that I'm alive, and you won't know whether I won or lost the bob. Now, I didn't know either, but I do have a tell. When I'm alive for a lot of money and they're coming to the wire and it's going to be a photo, I lean towards the wire. I never knew it. But a couple of close friends of mine pointed it out to me. And when Elate got nailed by Midnight Bisou at Saratoga, I forget the race, but it cost me over 100,000, that photo. And I knew I was going to get nailed. I knew Elate was going to get nailed. I saw Midnight Bisou coming, and I just knew it, but it wound up very close and hung in there. I was leaning. my friend knew. He goes, "You were alive for a lot of money, weren't you?" I'm like, "It depends if Code of Honor wins or not. If Code of Honor wins, it was a six-figure loss, and he did win." So I got my own way of doing it. I've been doing it a long time. It's not for everybody. I don't mean to be, and then like now I'm at a point where I won't cold shoulder anybody. If anybody asks me who I like, I will tell them. I don't, cold shoulder people, but I don't broadcast it or advertise it or do things like that. If you want to know, you have to ask me. And that's pretty much that.
Gotta check out if you're leaning. Well, no, you got to tell.
Right. Yeah, I have to tell. Yeah, I never knew it till it was pointed out to me, and then I caught myself doing. I'm like, they're right. I do. I lean when there's a lot of money. So now I'm conscious of it. I try to stop doing it. I couldn't. I wound up doing it subconsciously. So now I don't fight it anymore. I'm like, you know what? I lean. Most of the time we're betting from home nowadays anyway. It doesn't matter. So what are you going to do? But if you're watching, if you see me at the Breeders' Cup and you see me watching the race and I'm leaning towards the wire, I'm alive.
Well, that's good. It's funny you say that because I do the exact same thing. Maybe
did you know you did it, or did somebody tell you?
I knew I did it because I don't want this show to be about me, but we were doing a live stream for a contest, and I was, doing the video streaming, and I had a big bet on the pick 5, and it was the last leg. And I like to go back and watch some of it just to learn from it. And I saw myself leaning over watching the replay. Right. I didn't say anything or anything. I was just like you. I can be pretty quiet usually. But
my worst lean ever. Okay, and another bad, like I said, the bad beats I like about was Dunbar Road in the Breeders' Cup. I was up in one of the restaurant rooms at Del Mar. I was alive to Dunbar Road for a lot of money, big, serious, like killer money. And I watched the race. The TV in the restaurant was not high def and was on such an angle. Okay, and up on the 4th floor there, watching on the racetrack, I had no idea who won the photo. So I couldn't, for the life of me, I had no idea who won. I knew it was close, and I knew I had a shot. I didn't think I got it, but I wasn't sure. It was a terrible angle, but I was leaning big time. I was quiet, but I was leaning big time. And as soon as the race was over, a friend of mine who was watching on the NBC broadcast, whoever shows the Breeders' Cup on TV, is watching it in high def. And he's like, "You got it. You won." I'm like, "Are you sure?" I can't tell. He goes, "You won. I'm watching it. You won. I'm sure of it." And sure enough, they put up the other horse. What was it? Marsh Lorraine, whatever that horse's name was, beats me by a whisker. That was a tough one. But, there's been great ones too. So I'm the last person to complain. Racing has been very good to me that way. I've made a lot of money at this game over the years. I'm way ahead of the game as far as that goes. So I'm not complaining, but it's funny. The bad beats stick out to me more, and I'm more likely to talk about them than the wins. And there's been some great wins too.
Well, you'll have to have a horse named Big Lean. That would be your.
Right. If I ever own horses again, I probably won't. But if I ever do, that's going to be the name, or Big Lean Stables or something.
Okay, so let's change gears a little bit. I want to ask you a few other questions that I typically ask, and one's around fixed odds betting. Have you ever dabbled in that or seriously got into the fixed odds? If so, how big a? No?
I would love to, but I know someone who works for a major casino that offers that. Okay, online. And believe it or not, his job is to review and scrutinize wagers like that. And if you win big, okay, they lock you down, they close your account, they share it with all the other books. There's no way around it. They share your IP address. So it's very difficult to do. I've never got involved in it for that reason. I've never had to. I would love to be able to do it and bet big at fixed odds. I would love for exchange wagering to be legal in the U.S. where I could bet people that a horse won't win. Like I would have given you in the Belmont Stakes, okay, 5-1 on California Chrome that year. Okay, I don't remember what he went off, 9-5, 8-5, whatever it was. I just said I'll take up to 200,000 and give you 5-1. Everybody would have bet with me, right? But it's not legal. But I would love to be able to do that and offer something like that on an exchange wagering platform. I mean, I love that concept so much. I thought about moving to somewhere where it's legal out of the country just to do it. Ultimately decided against it, but I was hoping it would come here and be successful here. I understand why it's not, and it doesn't, but you know, I was much more attracted to that concept than I was fixed odds. Fixed odds, it'd be great if we could get it, but I don't, you know, if they're going to be, you know, shutting you down off a couple of wins, what's the point, you know?
So it sounds like you like the concept, you like the exchange better because there you're not going to be limited the way you would be in, you know, trying to go against the book. So if that was available,
you could actually take it. You could actually bet against a horse. You follow me?
Right, and with liquidity in the pools,
right,
without having to worry about getting bounced
exactly.
as soon as you're successful.
Exactly. So that I would love. But I don't see it happening. I think it would be great for the game, and a lot of people bring out, well, it would, you know, cause even more concern for nefarious activities and whatnot. But I don't know. You know, I would love the opportunity to see it, you know, implemented and try it and see how it went. But, you know, our sport, for some reason, we don't ever get ahead of the curve. We're always behind it when it comes to gambling and other forms of gambling. You know, we never get out ahead of the curve, which is a little frustrating. I'd like to see, you know, more evolution and more of that in our game. You know, even wagers where you know you can bet on maybe you know, more head-to-head wagering or more, you know, jockey-to-jockey wagering or, you know, winning a meet wagers and, you know, different types of prop wagers and, you know, different types of things that maybe mirror some of the sports wagers to get more people involved and just, you know, give more types of opportunities to attract more people. You know, we just never really run with that the way you know some other games do. That's a little frustrating.
Amen. No argument here. Okay, you were in the game before the rebates became a thing, but did you ever get heavily rebated, and did that change the way you play or anything?
I ultimately, about, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, I ultimately succumbed to the philosophy of the mindset of why am I leaving money on the table when I don't have to? You know, for a long time, I always preferred betting cash at the window. And I've taken a lot of cash home from the racetrack. I mean, that's stories for another day, but I mean, you know, I've left the racetrack with a $500,000 brick, literally brick of cash. You know, $100,000 bricks several times where they just brick it all up for you. You know, once I completely gravitated to betting through my phone, which I have done pretty much, except for rare occasions at the racetrack where I'll still just enjoy going to the window and betting cash. You know, I decided, you know, why am I leaving money on the table? So I do have a deal now where I bet, where I get what I would say for my handle is a very fair rebate and probably more than most people who have my handle probably get. But it has not changed my method or way that I approach the game at all. And it is definitely not what determines whether or not I have a winning or losing year. But it is a nice little reward and perk to get when you see it in your account. So why leave it on the table if it's there?
But it really didn't change. You don't go at tracks or
No,
pools where you're getting the bigger rebates to chase that.
I don't even know which tracks, and they sent me a list. I never even looked at it. I don't even know where I get a bigger rebate or what kind of wagers give me a bigger rebate. Don't know, don't care. It has not affected my play in any way at all, except giving me a little extra money.
So it's kind of like you get like 3% back on your credit card. You know, it doesn't change what you buy, but you kind of like having that 3%
Right.
show up in your account. Or
Right.
whatever.
Right. Exactly right.
Okay, let's talk about carryovers. Now you like playing the horizontals, and now there's carryovers, and some of them are jackpot force outs, but they're starting to come back with some of the more traditional, pick 6 or pick 5 with carryovers. Do you chase those at all? Do you focus on those, or will you play a track or a sequence you might not otherwise play, or does it?
No. They get my attention, and I'll look at them, but I only play certain tracks. Okay, so there could be the $1 million carryover at Fonner Park or Canterbury or one of these other tracks that I don't play, and I don't care if there's a $10 million carry. It's not my track. I don't know it. I don't play it. I'm not going to learn it overnight. I don't do it. I play the tracks that I'm comfortable with. I like to play. If I'm going to fight, this is a fight. If I want to fight, I got to. Your son's a great fighter, so you could probably understand it. If I'm going to fight, I want to fight in my backyard. I want to play in my home court advantage. So I don't go after sequences, no matter what the carryover is, that are not at my tracks. And when there is a carryover in at one of my tracks that's big, and it'll get my attention. I'll look at it. And if I feel it's worth it and it's the right kind of sequence, I'll go after it. But it's gotta all align for me and my style and the way that I play.
And that makes a lot of sense. It's probably good advice for the players out there, not to chase something outside your comfort zone, especially nowadays. The sharks definitely get attracted to that sort of blood in the water when there's a carryover. So you've got to be on the top of your game really to compete with those guys.
Exactly. So why am I going to put myself at any disadvantage in a game that's tough enough? It's tough enough when you've got home field. Okay, so I'm not going to give that up if I don't have to. What people don't realize, and so many people don't realize, is you don't have to bet any track, any race, or any sequence that you don't want to. Just because you're at the races doesn't mean you have to bet every race. Those people that are at the racetrack, when you go to the track and you look at the guy or girl or whoever it may be, okay, that's betting every race at every track, on every TV, on every monitor, and running back and forth to the window and doesn't want to miss a race or a sequence or anything, you and I both know that person has no chance to win over time. None. Zero.
Yeah, you define sort of the ultimate degenerate, right? You don't want to be that guy or that gal.
I mean, you that person can't win. So competitively, yeah. Do I want them doing that in the pool? Absolutely. But I don't want to be that person. You know what I mean? And anybody that I care about or that I want to see do well or that I know, I will tell the same thing. Anybody listening, don't be that guy or girl, because you don't have to bet anything that you don't like. Look at it as an investment. If that's never mind my style and the way I do it. If you could get a takeaway from me, I would say to anybody listening, look at it as an investment. Take it seriously. Say, you know what? I'm not just gambling. It's not just willy-nilly. I'm not just going buying a lottery ticket. I'm taking money that I've earned or that I've got or whatever. But right now, it's my money. It's in my pocket. I'm going to invest it and gamble it. I want to do it under the right circumstances that make sense to me and have the right risk and reward. And I think that's an important takeaway for anybody that's listening, because if you just do that, you will improve your overall performance.
So kind of along those lines, some people, they'll, that want to be serious about it, but still like to, if they're at the track, have some action. Do you do any like small action plays, or do you How do you feel about that? Where you
Nah,
just got a few bucks on just to keep, satiate that degenerate appetite?
very, very, very rarely. Very rarely. I mean, if I'm sitting around and I'm watching the races, and say, just take a little pick 4 or pick 5 just for fun or the heck of it. You know what I mean? But it would be for very small money. That like a tank of gas. That if I win, lose, or draw, it doesn't even matter. But rarely do I do that because it doesn't matter. So I don't even bother. I watch those races as diligently as races I bet, because to me, replays and taking my own notes are a vital and very important part of my game. I want to trust my eyes more than anything. Okay. So I take notes on races and horses all day long, even if I'm not betting. Okay. Because that might put me in position to make a score down the road. Okay. I watch the European races all the time in the morning from England and Ireland and France, taking notes, because I may see those horses at the Breeders' Cup, and the past performances on those horses leave an awful lot to be desired, as you probably know. But my notes don't. I've got lists of horses and races and notes of those races over there that I could write a book on. And a lot of times they pay off. They didn't get me out of Australia that day, but a lot of times they have got me, a lot of horses, or put me in a position not to use horses. So, just because I'm not betting doesn't mean that I'm not watching and not taking notes and not looking for something that might give me an edge at a later time.
So we haven't really talked much about your handicapping. I usually don't spend a lot of time on that, but I do like to cover it a bit. So it sounds like you're really into the watching the races and taking notes and trips. So talk a little bit about maybe what you're looking for when you do that, and also what else from and analyzing the races is important. Speed, pace, whatever it might be beyond just watching the races.
Well, it's all important. I try and look at a race where I paint a picture. I like to know where everybody's going to be and how fast everybody's going to be running at every pole in the race. Okay. And I like to try and figure out who's going to be running best at the end and who's going to get to the wire first, like everybody else. So I'll look at pace. I'll look at trip. I'll look at tendencies of jockeys, tendencies of trainers. I try and factor in everything that's important to me. I will thoroughly go through the past performances. I always read the past performances a certain way. I never read from the most recent race down. I always read from the bottom up, because that will point out patterns and form cycles a lot easier than reading it from the top down, which is what most people do. And I would argue that they're doing it wrong. You read from the oldest race to the newest race, not the newest race to the oldest race. That's what I do. When I watch replays, I watch them a couple of times. Watching replays is an art. Most people will watch a replay. They'll watch who they bet. They'll watch who's in front, or they'll watch whoever is making a big move or the announcer's calling. That's great for the first time. I always watch replays the next day or at night after the adrenaline is gone, after any biases are gone, after the excitement is gone, and I can be much more objective that way. And I'll always watch horses that nobody's watching. I'll look for horses mid-pack, in the back of the pack, that never made a move, and I'll look for things that don't necessarily show up. Like maybe a horse is between horses and in an uncomfortable position, and they're a young horse all the way around the track. Might not show a trouble line in the past performances, but I'll mark down between horses, uncomfortable spot, never really in the clear. Things like that, things that everybody doesn't see. Obvious things like a horse, closing into no pace, or a horse, facing more pressure than they're used to on the lead, a horse that doesn't like to run on the inside, being forced to run on the inside, the whole way. Things like that, that some people might miss, and things that CAWs can't program. You can't program those kind of things. So those guys I don't think are going anywhere. And I don't even know that the game can survive without their money in the pool or without drastic changes. So accepting that reality, whether we like it or not, but accepting that as a reality, I look for an edge. I look, well, okay, if I got to play against them and beat them, how do I do that? That's one of the ways. Find things that they can program into their algorithms to look for. Uh, those guys, I don't care if they've got half a dozen guys on the payroll. I'm going to make sure I'm better at them at spotting a horse that doesn't like to run on the inside, or doesn't like to be between horses, or doesn't like dirt in the face, or doesn't like a slow pace race or a fast pace race, or some kind of quirk or something about that horse that I can make a note of, and capitalize on at some point in the future where they might not, because it only takes one horse for them to miss to knock them out of a sequence. Or if I've got to share a pool with them and I could get a $20,000 hit on a pick 5, investing $500 when they had to invest $15,000 to hit it, I'm okay with that.
So you talked about one way to sort of compete with the computers was, watching races and looking for subtle things that they might not have in their algorithms, as you said. Any other things that you think might give a human an edge over the computers, at least for the time being, that you look for?
Yeah. Memory. Okay. Hidden things, like, for argument's sake, you take a trainer that's got a very low percentage with first-time starters. Okay. They're always at a disadvantage with races with less information. So let's say trainer A has, according to the form, 10% win with first-time starters. Okay. And that's there. They know that. That's programmed into their algorithms. Okay. So they're going to base their wagers and the horses they use, based on that and the percentage of on the other trainers, first time starting win percentage. Okay, we know that. But let's say I know that trainer A that has a 10% win percentage showing in his stats with first time starters, that percentage jumps up to 25% when he breezes a horse 4 furlongs, three days before the race in 48 or 47. That's his tell. Okay, when he's really cranking one up, or when he's betting one, or something like that. If I could make a note or pick up on something like that consistently, and make a note of it and have it, etched in my brain, where I know, hey, it's like, just use an obvious example that everybody knows. When Bob Baffert works his horses, 111 and change going 3/4 of a mile, they're probably going to run very good. Something like that. But something less subtle with a trainer that's not, high profile. But, I remember, years ago, everybody was saying Bill Mott never wins first time out. And he was popping with all these horses at Saratoga, and I was catching a bunch of them because he did win first time out when, he had certain tells and certain things that he did in the workouts. So his win percentage under certain conditions that didn't show in his stats were much higher than the 8 or 10% that whatever it was that was showing back at that time. So things like that give you a tremendous edge. And luckily, I have a good memory in this game and have been doing it for a long time. So history and patterns in this game will repeat themselves. And if you can remember that or make notes of things like that, at some point they will pay off.
That's a really good point about stats, and I talk about this sometimes as well, where the kind of flat stats, just like you said, trainer win percentage or post position win percentage, those probably aren't very useful and possibly misleading. But when you can actually put some context around that and kind of dig a little deeper, that's where you might get some value. And that sounds like that's what you do as well.
100%. And another thing that a lot of people get wrong, and it's, I'm glad because I capitalize on it, but we'll use the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland, not last year, But the one before that, the year that Nick Skull won, and everybody spoke about what a speed bias it was. Okay, after 4 races, the guys on TV were saying, "Oh, you got to be on a lead to win. You got to be on a lead to win." Couldn't be further from the truth. Look at the charts. I mean, Essential Quality won the Juvenile that same day that they were saying this, came from way out of the pace, way off the pace. There were plenty of off the pace winners. I don't know what they were talking about. The track was lightning fast, yes, but it was honest, and you don't decide that you have to be on the lead to win when the first 3 races went wire to wire with 2 favorites and 1 horse that was by himself on the lead that nobody challenged. That's just that's a tremendous opportunity when people tend to think that and start betting all the speed horses on when it's an honest track. You'll get value on an off the pace horse that they'll be staying away from because they think you have to be on the lead to win. So it's frustrating to me from a fan and promoting the game as a skill game perspective. But from a selfish bettor's perspective, I love when I hear them saying that when they're not right. And 9 out of 10 times they're not right. So or it's too soon or too premature to say that. And that day at Keeneland was a perfect example. It was not a speed racetrack. If you look at the charts, they will show you could win from anywhere. A biased track gets front run. If it's a speed track, gets front runners home that would not have won had it not been a speed track. And the same thing gets closers home that wouldn't have got up if it wasn't a closers track. That's a true bias. And when you see a true bias, usually it runs for the whole card. It doesn't deviate except if the weather changes or they harrow the track the opposite way or do something, fluky during the course of the card. But if they don't, generally, it'll hold true for the entire card. And that's a true bias. So, capitalizing on that not being properly identified or identified prematurely or incorrectly is another way that you can get an edge. And the algorithm guys, the CAW guys will gravitate to, that information and, program, their computer to know that this was a speed track. So, we're going to downgrade these speed horses that won when that just might not be the case.
Is the bias something that you try to track and take advantage of either during the card or afterwards?
Yes. When there's a real bias, yes. But I'll be the first to say, real biases are not nearly occurring as often as most people think they are. Most of the time, the track it plays fair. Now, some tracks do have a tendency to play a little speed friendly. Gulfstream, Keeneland, they are just a little bit speed friendly in general. And sometimes they can have a legitimate speed bias, and sometimes certain tracks could have a closer's bias. But I make sure it's to my classification a true bias before I'll try and capitalize on it. But once I feel that there is one, absolutely. Will I try and capitalize? Absolutely. Especially if it's, against the grain, like that day at Keeneland when everybody thought it was a speed track and it wasn't. If I like a closer, I'm going all in, Yeah,
your friend Tommy, he's told me many times that he just loves it when people think there's a speed bias, even if there really is, because that just makes him double down on the closers later in the card, because not only do people overbet the speed, but the jockeys tend to overreact. And he said, he's found some real opportunities in that.
100%. 100% agree. Like I said, Tommy and I agree on a lot of things. That's one of them.
So you talked about you focus on certain tracks. Which tracks do you like to focus in on?
Few and far between. I like Belmont and Saratoga, Keeneland, Churchill Downs, Santa Anita, Del Mar, and that's just about it. Gulfstream.
So the major tracks, really, yeah. You don't play any of the smaller ones?
No. Gulfstream during the championship meet. No, I don't play the smaller ones at all. I like bigger pools. I like to, invest my money on the, better outfits and better horses. Nothing against the cheaper horses. I do as much as rescue as anybody, and I'm very involved in that, and on many different levels. But for investing money in betting and gambling, I like the bigger circuit tracks, the bigger pools, and the better horses.
Okay, so you mentioned you watch some of the foreign races and take notes because you can use that when they come to race in the U.S. But do you dabble in any of the foreign pools, Europe, Hong Kong, Australia?
Oh, Europe, yes. Hong Kong, no. Australia, no, just because there's just so many hours in a day and I don't have a chance to study them. But England and Ireland and France, not as much, because the past performances in France, they might as well not even have them. I don't even understand them. I would love to talk to whoever it is that makes up the past performances in France and just get an answer on that. And I would love to know why in England and Ireland they've got different post position numbers than where they put the horses in the gate. That makes no sense to me. But the past performances, they're like, but England and Ireland, the past performances are enough. And my knowledge of the horses and the outfits there and whatnot has become savvy enough where I do like to bet those races, especially the Group 1 and Group 2 races and some of the maiden races. And, I have horses from there all over my, my watch list. So, yes, I do bet, England and Ireland. I'll bet Royal Ascot. I bet as much as Saratoga.
So what's the biggest difference, or is there, in terms of the way you bet those races or analyze those races, other than just the difference in the past performances?
I bet them the same way.
And primarily by watching the races and taking notes, is that where you get most of your edge?
And the past performances, but watching and taking notes, absolutely. I would say yes. I would say in the States and abroad, my biggest edge comes from watching, taking notes, and seeing things that other people don't see, or everything is subject to your interpretation and how you see it as well. I'm playing this game since I'm a little kid, so I like to say I have a trained eye. You know what I mean? I see things from what I think is a very legitimate, realistic perspective. I've been friends with a lot of riders and a lot of trainers, and have had heart-to-heart, personal, serious conversations with jockeys about things that go on and stuff that goes on. So I've been a sponge to all of that for years and years and years. So, I could watch a race and see things a rider's doing or see things a horse is doing that the average player might not see. My biggest edges come from there, and my biggest and most confident wagers will come from things like that I've seen.
So, since you are familiar with those European horses, and they sometimes do come to the U.S., is there anything that you look for in those races that will tell you, yeah, this horse is probably going to translate its game or maybe improve when it comes over to the U.S.? Is there anything that you're looking for in that regard?
Oh, absolutely. I look for ones that have nice bursts, but don't necessarily like the softer turf courses that I think are going to like firmer turf courses. I look for horses that show, early speed and hang tough. In some of the longer races there, where they're coming in, they're running uphill down in the stretch. A lot of people don't realize that at certain courses, that they run uphill and downhill over there. So those horses have a lot of bottom, and speed can carry a lot better over here than it does over there. So there's different things over time you get to look for, and just the way a horse moves over the ground. You could see a horse has some quality and some talent and some class to him, but just might not like the going over there. A lot of times those horses come here and really transfer their form very well, or move up several lengths. So I look for things like that.
Okay, well, let's shift on. That's interesting. So you're the only person I've talked to so far on the show that is into the European racing. So that was interesting. I'm glad to hear a little bit more about that. Other types of gambling. Do you do any other gambling games, or are you just a horse player when it comes to gambling?
I played poker for many, many, many years. I'll occasionally play, and I played some high stakes poker. I grew up in Brooklyn, and when I was 15 and 16, friends of mine and their parents had what we used to call back then Las Vegas nights, or illegal casinos where they were in the back of stores, back of restaurants, sometimes in church rec halls or whatnot. They'd pay the police off and they'd run, a card game, a dice game, and whatnot. And my mom was a poker player. She used to play there all the time. I used to play. Eventually, when I was 17 or 18, I used to work in some of them, dealing poker, playing. I grew up hanging out in a park in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, called Bedford Park. In the summertime, we had those picnic tables, and we would play, quarter, half dollar poker games. All the tables were full. There would be maybe 7, 8 games going on at once. We would get raided and arrested by the police for gambling and public all the time. We would take 2x4s, put them at the entrance of the park with nails in them, so when the police drove in, they would get flats. Crazy times growing up, but yes, played poker for many years before the boom. Can hold my own at any poker table. Love the game. Don't have the time anymore to play it like I used to, but I remember last time I went to Vegas, I walked into the poker room at Wynn. I looked at my girlfriend at the time. I said, "This is going to be like taking candy from a baby. Let's just go. Let's go win 10,000 and we'll get out of here and it'll pay for the whole trip." And we did. I mean, so it's easy. It's easy at certain games. Now it's tougher. I mean, one of the things they talk about in the tournaments that they don't allow is playing in collusion. There's a lot of collusion playing of poker in the poker rooms in the casinos in Vegas nowadays, and even in the card rooms that have poker at the racetracks and whatnot. You could spot it in a minute if you're a savvy player. There's a lot of that goes on in poker now. I won't play online because I don't trust it at all. So, I mean, I can play, but I just don't really have the time to play anymore. But I do love the game. I love to play chess. I will occasionally play chess for big money. There is a ring of people. Well, maybe ring sounds bad. Sounds like, but there's a lot of clubs and groups of people that play big money chess games. And I've been known to dabble in that from time to time.
So let's talk about both. I'm glad that chess is and poker. What did you take away or learn? Becoming a good poker player, especially high stakes, and same with chess, that helps you be a better horse player.
I think I would go back to just playing smart, knowing how to play your cards, and not being afraid when you got the hand. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to go all in. I mean, Hold'em is the game nowadays. Don't be afraid to go all in. When you think you got to play aggressively. When you think you've got it, you've got it. Chess is different. Chess is not a game that a lot of people play for money, and it's a very cerebral game. I have a certain way. I won't play now any of the time games where they time your moves. I know a lot of people like that, and it does shorten the games. I don't play that way. I like to be able to think about my move as long as I want, and you can think about yours as long as you want. And if it takes us a month to finish a game for 50,000 or 10,000, whatever the case may be, I'm willing to do that. I don't want to have to make my move within 15 minutes because that's just not me. That's not how I grew up and learned how to play. And I can play pretty well. I was playing my wife. Okay, she learned. She used to play, and then and she got me to play with her on the phones when we were playing. Okay, and one day she says, I've been practicing. I've been reading books. I've been playing other people. I'm gonna beat you this time. And I'm like, all right, let's go. And we played. And son of a gun, Chris, it was our longest and our most toughest game ever. And it wound up a rare stalemate. And I was like, I got to tell you. And it never dawned on me what she did. I said, I got to tell you. You impressed me to no end. You were amazing. I can't believe you played me to a stalemate. I never thought I'd ever see the day when you could beat me. You played me to a stalemate, and that's just as good. I'm like so impressed. And she says, I have to confess, I cannot tell a lie. I'm like, what? She's like, it wasn't me. I'm like, who was it? Now I was mad because I'm like, who was this? She goes, it was a computer. She goes, and not only was it a computer, it was a computer that never lost. She goes, you played a computer that never lost to a draw. I was like, wow. I was like embarrassed. I'm like, I should have known because you played unbelievable. I mean, I could play. I remember once she was playing somebody at work and she was down to like 4 pieces and this person was belittling her and beating her all the time. And she's like, I can never beat this person. I says, give me the phone. So she says, well, I said, give me the phone. I'll beat. She goes, no, I'm so far behind. I said, don't even worry about it. Give me the phone. Destroyed him.
Well, that's interesting because I know I'm a chess player, not so much anymore, but never really had any high stakes involved. The one thing I like about chess is that, unlike horseplay, is, you don't have tough beats in chess. It's pretty much all skill when you get beat.
100%.
Okay, so let's move on to a few other questions. You've hit on this before, but I'll let you kind of summarize. What do you think are the most important attributes for success in horse playing? That have been the main reasons for your success.
Okay, that's easy for me. Be willing to cash less to win more. Don't try and use all the horses. Use the ones you like. Bet it for more than the minimum amount, and cash less tickets, but win more money. Have discipline. Be selective. You're not forced to go after anything that doesn't fit what you do, what you excel at. Track your wages. See what your strong points are, what your weak points are. Go after your strong points. If you're a good Exacta player, play Exactas. If you're a good pick 4 player, play pick 4s. If you're a good double player, play doubles. Put all the edges and that you can on your side of the table. And to me, the most important thing that outweighs all of that is come prepared. Do the work. There is no shortcut. You can't circumvent doing the work. You can't, buy a sheet that's going to give you the winners and make you successful at this game. None of them will. You can't have a program that will do that. You can't have any one product that will do that. You can't buy anyone's picks that's going to do that. You have to do the work, have an opinion, and be willing to back your opinion and hone your skills and do the work and learn from people that have been successful, not from people that have, posted a big ticket that they got lucky to hit, like those cowboy tickets, but from people who have consistently been good at the game and are willing to share that knowledge and learn from them and don't try and take a shortcut to beating the horses because they'll annihilate you. Horses humble everybody, myself included.
So a related question, and you kind of answered it, but I'll let you answer it again. So what do you think is the biggest mistake that most players make, that if they would correct that would lead to better success?
There's a couple. When we touched on a few of them, but using too many horses, betting too many races, too many sequences, going after tracks and sequences that they're not familiar with, and not doing their homework. You show up for the test without doing your homework, you're not going to do as good as the person who studied all night.
You sound like my mother.
Get old. I sound like mothers and fathers. She's right. The older we get, the smarter they get. Believe me.
Yes, definitely. You mentioned record keeping. Do you keep records? And if so, what kind of records do you keep and how do you use them?
P&L, profit and loss. How much did I invest and how much did I win back? Used to be that my P&L included not only my gambling, but all my expenses because it had to. So I would know what my monthly expenses were and I would know how much I had to win. And if it didn't happen that month, you know, I could only afford to survive with a 2, 3, 4 month top, you know, downward spiral. And then I had to make a score, or I would go under. So eventually, I got to the point where I could be pretty comfortable that would happen. And you know, I did it for close to 20 years, Chris. I mean, it's a long time. There's not a lot of people that can say that, you know, and I still have the tax returns. I've been audited. You know, I still have all the tax returns that show it. And, you know, when I go back and look at them now, I'm like, wow, that was impressive. I'm glad I don't have to do it in today's game.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it seems, you know, this has been a common theme with all the players, and these are all guys like you who've had a track record of success. They all say it's just tougher and tougher, and their handle's gone down because, like you said, they have to be more selective, and so that means they wager less, and that's kind of been a theme with everybody. And it sounds like it's consistent with you as well.
100%. Yeah, no, I'm in a position now to bet more than I ever did, and I bet less than I did since probably the early 80s.
Yeah, that's not a good sign for the game when we hear that message consistently from people with the passion and success, you know, a long history of that. So you can only imagine what it's like for the players who don't have, you know, that same level of commitment or past success. You know, you got to feel like they're feel even more strongly, you know, and reacted similar way.
Yeah, no, it's a concern. I agree. You know, I mean, my biggest gripe with you know, racing management is you know, they've almost shunned the gambler for so long without realizing or recognizing or understanding that the gambler is their customer. It's not the fan. It's not the weekend warrior. It's the gambler. You know, you can't shun your customer or not know your customer. You know, it's unfortunate, but it's just a reality of that business. I think it's a problem. That's why I said earlier, you know, I'm one of the few people that I don't know that welcome is the right word, but I don't shun the CAWs because I think they're keeping us alive. I mean, I think I'm the only guy that ever actually interviewed on the record a CAW player. Who insisted on anonymity, but I was able to verify that they were a CAW player. You know, I've seen what they had access to, how everything works, and the contract that they have to sign in order to, you know, to bet through the tote system and all of that stuff. And you know, one of the things that, you know, my biggest takeaway was that their overall handle is probably, I mean, everybody says 30 to 35% of the entire pool. I think it's a little bit higher than that. And I worry that racing might not be able to sustain itself in its current way without them. So I say, okay, yeah, none of us like it. But what happens if it's gone, if they're gone? You know, I mean, a lot of the smaller tracks will close. Those guys, like you said, are chasing pools that nobody would be chasing at night just because of the rebates and their minimum bet requirements that they have to keep up in order to get those rebates. So they're betting into pools that they might not normally be into. And if they're 35, 40% or 45% even of the pool, what happens if you pull them out of there?
That's a good question.
That, but it's not a good situation for racing to be in.
So, you said you interviewed a computer player. What other, were the insights or the takeaways that you got from that experience that are worth sharing?
Well, I can tell you without any question of doubt, they do not see unplayed combinations on pick 5s, pick 6s, and pick 4s like a lot of people seem to think they do. They are not allowed under any circumstances to ever cancel a wager. Okay, they can't cancel a wager if there's a scratch, a late scratch. You know how if there's a late scratch, sometimes the tracks will give us a minute to, cancel a ticket, and they can never cancel a ticket. They're stuck with it. Once they make the bet, they could never do it. Now, they don't get hit with that a lot because they bet late. They don't bet as late as we think. The odds drops. And the other day, when Ron Moquette's horse won the maiden race at Keeneland, he was 8-1 coming down the stretch, crossed the wire at 10-1. Nobody mentions that. So sometimes they're wrong. Okay. The late money doesn't always go down. Sometimes it upticks. That gets much less noticed than when it downticks. But they don't bet the last second. If they've got a bunch of bets to send in, even with their system directly into the tote, they've got to give themselves about a minute, 90 seconds to make sure all their bets get into the system. Okay. Now, for the system to then update all the odds and everything, that might take halfway through the race, which is sometimes why we see those late odds. But they're not putting those things in at the bell. They're definitely not past posting their wagers. So certain things like that people think that they do not do. And I've seen the system. I've seen the contract. I've seen how it works. I've seen the large rebate or high volume platforms that they wager on and what they have access to. And as accurate as some of the information is out there, just as much as inaccurate and blown out of proportion. So those were some of the things I learned, not only from interviewing a player, one-on-one, but through, verifying him and seeing all the information and talking to different racetracks and all three of the, high volume outfits that there are 4. 3 were willing to talk to me. One of them wouldn't talk to me, but 3 were willing to talk to me on the record. And, it was enlightening and, is inherently some of what they do an edge? I would say yes. But they invest a lot of money. Their models are expensive. Most of them have payrolls and treat it like a business. What business do the people that spend the most or bet the most or invest the most don't get the bigger perks? I mean, that's just a reality of life. I mean, is it frustrating that they're getting 12 and 13% and it's drowning out us? Absolutely. But the flip side is, before we, want to just cast them out, we've got to look at, can we sustain our sport without them?
Yeah. Both questions need to be asked. Can we sustain our sport with them as is?
Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly.
What's the middle ground because I think right now it's not sustainable either. Right.
Right. Exactly right. Spot on. I'm glad you pointed that out, but that gets pointed out a lot. The flip side, can we survive without them, really doesn't. But both points are equally valid and equally concerning, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else on any pools or tracks that they tend to target more than others, or the types of races, or where they're stronger or weaker, or any insight on any of that part of the?
I'd say that anyone that thinks they're not diversified is fooling themselves, and anyone thinks that they're not in pools that they're quote excluded from is being naive. Okay, let's say you and I are a team. Okay, we're a syndicate. Usually, they're all one person. The contract is signed by one person. There's no corporations. Well, there could be a corporation, but there's one guy that has to sign the contract, and he's ultimately responsible. Okay, whether he has partners or not, or they all have people on their payroll that give them information and do programming for them. But theoretically, it's one guy, and there's about a dozen of them right now. Okay, let's say you're that guy. And Naira says, you know what? You can't bet into this late pick 5 pool anymore. You're excluded. Okay. You still have your model. Your model's still going to give you all the information on that sequence that you have. Okay. You're a gambler. All right. You want to win. You love the sequence. You think it's going to pay. You don't think that those guys have another account that's outside of their high volume shop that they can bet through, or their wife or brother or girlfriend or friend or somebody doesn't have an account that they have access to and can use their algorithms to bet into, just with one sacrifice that they're not getting their 12-13% rebate? Of course they do. And to think otherwise is naive. If they want to be in a sequence, they're in a sequence. So you could advertise, oh, the CAWs aren't in here. Well, they may not be getting their rebate out of there, but if they want to be in there, they're in there and they're affecting the payout.
Interesting. So anything else on CAWs before we move on, since you had kind of unique access that most of us haven't? Anything else that you learned through that?
No, those would be the takeaways.
Okay, so this is kind of related. We've been talking about sort of the state of the game. If you had your magic wand and you could make a change to racing, to make it a better game, what would be the one or two things that you'd like to see changed?
I would very seriously explore the Hong Kong model and the strictness and policing of the game that Hong Kong does on every level, and see if there is somehow a way that we could incorporate that into our sport over here. And it may come down to less being more, less racing days, more cooperation between the racetracks, one central governing body, one set of uniform rules for all the racetracks, and strict regulations and guidelines with little room for error or falling outside of those guidelines. So I would run it very strict. I would take away the perception that racing is fixed and a lot goes on. I would have cameras in every stall, on every shed row, monitored by a third-party company. I would have stewards have to explain their decisions. I would have riders have to explain their decisions with a lot more transparency. Very, very similar to a lot of the stuff they do in Hong Kong. I would run it much stricter, with much more accountability and much more transparency. Probably less race day medication, and probably less therapeutic medication. I would be more in favor, and this would lead to smaller fields. I get it, but I'm all about the horse. I would be more inclined to insist on giving a horse time off as opposed to giving him a painkiller to get him to race. And things like that would improve the perception of the game and the health of our horses, and hopefully return to the sport of kings instead of the sport of whatever we are today.
So you kind of like that Hong Kong model of the way they kind of have everything kind of buttoned down and regulated and controlled?
I wouldn't use the word like. I would say I think it's necessary.
Okay.
I think it's necessary for the sport. Unfortunately, I think it's clearly evident that American horse racing has failed at self-regulation and self-policing itself. I don't know that HISA is the answer to correct that. But I don't know that they can possibly be any worse than we've been. So I think we failed, and that ship has sailed on self-regulation and self-policing. Even though we have made improvements, I don't think they're nearly close to what it needs to be to have any chance to restoring the game to what it was.
Okay, interesting. And I think a lot of people kind of share those concerns, and that the way it's going now, it isn't working. So we need to try something different for sure. Anything else before we wrap things up that we haven't touched on that you wanted to cover that I haven't prompted you on yet?
No, I think you covered everything. I think there's some good takeaways. I appreciate you having me, Chris. I thank you very much for that. I think we covered quite a bit, and I hope that people enjoy it. And I'm accessible through Pass the Wire. Anybody that's got any follow-up questions for me, I welcome.
You're on Twitter. You may give out your handle.
Yeah, it's at Jonathan Stetton on Twitter. I respond to everybody that is appropriate. I get some crazy stuff thrown at me, but
yeah. Don't
anybody
feed the trolls. Don't feed the trolls.
Anybody who's a gentleman or professional or has a legitimate question, I never leave anybody hanging. I get back to everybody. I answer everybody. I can be emailed through the website, passthewire.com. We have Pass the Wire TV. I respond to just about every comment on there. We've got some great content on there about ticket structuring, pace handicapping, all different things like that. And I'm always open to questions and helping people try and learn and improve and capitalize on strong points and learn from some of the mistakes I've made over time, So I welcome all of that. And again, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. You put me in some good company, and I appreciate that.
Well, I think you definitely have shared some great insight, and I'm sure the listeners are going to take away a lot from this conversation. So I'd like to just end on maybe share a memorable score. It sounds like you've had a few on the pick six side. It doesn't have to be the biggest score or whatever, but what's one, a real fond memory as a horse player, a score that you like to look back at?
Well, the biggest pick six I ever hit was $565,000 at Saratoga, and that's one that I bet over $9,000 into. And that one always stands out because of the size of it. But one of the ones that really stand out is several years ago. I don't remember the year, but somebody could probably look it up and figure it out. There was a record carryover. I was on a little bit of a losing streak, and there was a record carryover at Del Mar, okay? And I bet about $1,000 pick six, and I singled the horse in the first leg by default. I just couldn't find anybody to bet. I just did something a little bit out of character, and it was a horse that was the favorite and was dropping down, big drop down, the kind of horse we all just avoid like the plague, But I'm like, I can't find a single. I got to single somebody. It's a tough sequence. I want to bet it. It's a huge carryover. I need the money. I was playing for a living back then. And I got to go into this. I'm going to single this horse. And he wins. I wind up going all the way into the last leg, and I've got 5 horses. One of the horses I have is a horse named Shine On, okay? Clinton Potts was out in California at that time riding him. He didn't win a lot of races when he was out in California. The pick six with him was coming back $750,000. I had him and I think 4 other horses. It was a maiden claimer. He goes to the lead, and he's got about a 2-length lead all the way around in a maiden claiming race at Del Mar. But he never looked good. He looked like he was riding them hard the whole way. And they're on the turn and turning for home, and he's got that 1.5-length lead turning for home. But I'm looking at the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th horse, and I've got some of them because he just doesn't look like he's going to win. And he was my biggest one, $750,000. Okay, that was my biggest return if I hit it. And Potts, I can't knock him. He took the turn tight. He was whipping and pumping for all he was worth. And it wasn't so much, Chris, that he was hanging on. It was that nobody was coming. So he was staying in front, that length and a half, 2 lengths, length and a half, and just nobody had any kick. And I'm like, oh, get home, get home, get home, get home. And at the end of the race, when they hit the black stripes coming to the wire, a horse on the outside comes flying and nails him. So I look down. Who is it? I don't have him. Oh, a couple of days later, okay, that was Delmar. Now my bankroll is getting really low. I bet the pick six at Saratoga, and my single this time was in the last race. It was a horse named New York Dixie. May he rest in peace. Garrett Gomez was riding the horse. It was a New York bred turf race. The horse hadn't run since the fairgrounds, all open company races, off a little bit of a layoff, and that was my single. I bet $576 on the ticket. Wind up alive going into the last leg. I'm alive to the single. They put up the will pays. I'm watching at home. I bet the ticket at Calder and went home to watch the races because that was my only bet for the day. Okay. Bet the pick six, went home. I watched, they put up the will pays, and it's coming back 146,000. There's 2 live tickets. I got one of them, right? I'm like, beautiful. The race goes off. They're going around the far turn, and he's in all kinds of traffic trouble. And I'm like, no, not 2 in 1 week. I'm going to lose. Please somehow get through. Sure enough, he swings him to the outside, Gomez. He goes to work, and he gets up, and the guy calls a photo, okay? Now, the only 2 live tickets was mine and the other winner. Anybody else that was carrying over again, okay? I knew he got up. The guy says, a photo. I'm like, he got it. He definitely got it. Sure enough, they put him up, pays $146,000. That was on I want to say a Sunday. Okay. The next day was a dark day. They weren't racing on Mondays or Tuesdays at this time. Okay. Might have been a Monday, but the next day was a dark day. I go to Calder the next day with my ticket, right? I hand my ticket to the teller. Now, you look at your ticket when you get it. Do we ever check our tickets as good? I didn't bet it on the phone. I bet it at an actual ticket with cash. Do we ever look at them as close as we should with a pick six? Probably not. I give the guy the ticket. He asks me for my social security number. He punches it in, and I don't see anything. He says, John, the guy at the teller knew me. He says, John, wait right here. So I'm like, okay, there a problem? He goes, no, wait right here. So he goes to the back. He comes back. He goes, Ed Mackey, he's the director of mutuals, wants to see you. I says, okay. So he takes me in the back behind the bay into the mutual office. And Ed's there, and he knows who I am. And he goes, John, he goes, I'm embarrassed to tell you this. I says, what? He goes, today's a dark day here. We're only doing simulcasting. He goes, now I'm worried something's wrong with my ticket, obviously, right? I got like that sinking feeling, and I'm thinking, what could be wrong? He says, I don't have enough money to pay you. I says, what? He goes, I don't have enough money to pay you. He says, if I pay you, we'll have no money to run here today. I says, are you kidding me? He goes, no. And he goes, and it gets worse than that. I'm like, what? He goes, I can't even give you a check. He goes, because Churchill Downs policy is I can't issue a check until they wire the money to the Calder account, and I pay you out of the Calder account, which we don't have enough money to even pay you by check. I'm like, are you kidding me, Ed? That's like embarrassing. It's only $140-something. I mean, after taxes, I mean, come on, man. He goes, I don't have it. I says, well, I don't want a check. Here's what I want. All right. You tell me when to come back and when I could have my money. He says, is Thursday okay? I said, Thursday's fine. I'll be back Thursday. I left. I immediately called Pat Mahoney, who was the director of mutuals at Saratoga for Naira at the time, who used to be the director of mutuals at Calder. And they knew me because I was one of the biggest bettors there back then. So I called Pat. I told him the story. He goes, yeah, that's probably true. Don't even worry about it, John. They'll have your money for you Thursday. So I'm like, congratulations. I'm like, thanks, Pat. You put me at ease. Thursday, I go back. They take me in the room. He's got $100,000 brick, all bricked up and wrapped nice. He's got about 20-something thousand loose for me. He goes, do you want me to open up the brick and count it? He goes, it's all been run through the machine. There's no counterfeit bills. It's all legit. I said, no. Throw it in a paper bag. put the brick 100,000 a paper bag. Give me the rest. I gave him 1,000. I gave the guy who sold me the ticket 1,000. I gave everybody standing around a couple of hundred. Walked out with the $100,000 brick, about 20,000 loose, and we were back in action. Because with all the pick fives and everything else, I wound up clearing about 120 after taxes. But it is a great feeling to go to the window and then tell you they don't have enough money to pay you. So that was New York Dixie, and rest in peace, Garrett Gomez.
You broke the bank, and Garrett Gomez was a great rider. He's a good guy to have your money resting on in that last leg, for sure.
Yeah, with a single, just got up. But it was one of those, you know how sometimes there's photos, you didn't get it. Sometimes there's photos, you did get it, and sometimes you don't know. I knew it was close, but I knew I got it. So it was a good feeling. I knew he got up. New York Dixie was the name of the horse. And like I said, that was on a very downward swing for me. I was going through some very tough times personally, going through a bunch of turmoil in my life personally that wound up taking a ton of my bankroll and put me under a lot of extra pressure, and that helped turn things around considerably.
The man who broke the bank at Calder.
I ran, broke the bankroll. I didn't have enough to pay me. Absolutely. Unfortunately,
the rider is no longer with us, the horse is no longer with us, and the track is no longer with us. So that was an old story.
Shows how old I am. I laugh about stuff like that because I'm like, not only do I remember the sires and the grandsires, I'm on like recycled names already. You know what I mean? Like I remember, there was a horse with that name back when I was a kid. So I'm like on recycled names. So, we're getting up there, but I still love the game with as much passion as I did when I was a kid.
It's the best game. There's no doubt about it. No doubt in my mind. Nothing comes close.
I borrowed. I was walking around Saratoga. I don't even know how old I was. We could probably figure it out by looking it up. When Devona Dale was an odds-on favorite in the Alabama, and I read the racing form that morning, sitting around our motel up there for the summer by a little kid, and read the form and said, this horse that's in the air is the only speed. She's going wire to wire. There's no way Devona Dale's going to be able to catch this horse. I walked around. I wasn't even a teenager, I don't think. I was maybe 13, 14, whatever, 12. I borrowed $1,000. I went around to everybody my dad know. Lend me $100. I bet $1,000 on it's in the air. Went wire to wire. I says, well, paid everybody back plus interest at the end of the day. I said, what an easy game this is. I'll never lose.
Yeah. Never ever say that. That's the mush for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that sounded like a fun day when you're a kid, though. Well, it's been great. I really enjoyed it.
$1 million back then. You know what it's like when you're a kid to bet $1,000 and win, So.
Yeah, that would have been a fun day, I can imagine. Well, it's been great. I really enjoyed the conversation. Really good stuff. Really appreciate your spending the time. And good luck in the Derby. I know I'm sure you're going to be well positioned to take advantage of something on Derby Day. It sounds like you really target that one. So good luck with that. It's only 2 weeks away.
Less than 2 weeks. Let's be here before we know it.
That's right. And it should be a fun Derby this year. And I want to thank all our listeners again for all your support. Really good feedback, and please keep it coming. And continue to support us on whatever platform you listen, subscribe, give us good reviews, give us shout outs wherever you can on Twitter, etc.
Will do. Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I do appreciate it. And send me the link and I'll share it out. I'll even put a link to it up on the website, and
awesome.
Encourage people to check out all the episodes and put it together as a little educational package with I'll put them up there. So send me if you can. I think Spotify works the best on my website if there's a link that I'll find it. So
I'll tweet it out, and it has a link to all the Spotify, Apple, couple others. So we'll do that for sure. Really appreciate that. And what I'm trying to do is kind of create a library that's kind of evergreen that people can go to get this kind of information that just isn't readily available. I mean, typically the podcasts focus on, giving out picks or the handicapping, not so much about the betting. So that's what we're trying to do. And this is going to be a great addition to that library. So thank you again. Thank all the listeners. And most importantly, may you all boldly go where no horse player has gone before.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. I truly appreciate you having me.
Thanks.
Ciao. Bye.